One day, the world changed after the abyss was discovered, a place where monsters that only existed in fantasies were real. But on that very same day, people also awakened incredible powers, managing to defeat these monsters, and that's how this new era called the Awakened emerged. However, that isn't the reality for our protagonist, because unlike the others who managed to awaken their powers and are incredibly strong, he is nothing more than a luggage carrier who failed to awaken his powers. And Hayes already 35 years old, quite old, right? But it's no time for him to wallow in regret, because instead of gathering magic stones, he is trying to face the monster, something Hayes clearly not capable of a while. Later, after managing to gather all the magic stones, he went to inform his boss, but right before his eyes, everyone was already dead. And naturally, he became a bit curious about what could have done this to them. In their final moments, and obviously, after hearing that voice, he was absolutely terrified, because the monster standing before him is a colossal monster. This is Asmodeus, an S-rank monster. And in a moment of desperation like this, he tries to attack the monster. But if even the actual hunters couldn't defeat this monster, what hope does our protagonist have? With overwhelming power, the monster simply raises its hands and tears off our protagonist's arm. Now, just like the others lying fallen on the battlefield, this will also be the end for our protagonist. But he won't give up that easily, however. When he turned around, the monster had already pierced his head. Is he really going to die like this? Just being a luggage carrier. For other hunters, because right after his parents died in a car accident, he suffered severe bullying at school, just for being unawakened. And not only that, he was ignored his entire life simply because he didn't have any powers. And with all these reasons, is this really going to be the end of him? Just transporting luggage for other hunters? Maybe yes, or maybe not, because while he was lost in his thoughts, all the awakening conditions were fulfilled. Then, completely out of nowhere, time stops and a divine being appears in front of him. And he gets a bit confused, because how could a being like Asmodeus be frozen in time? Like this man. And not only that, who is this crazy guy in front of him? Bro, because to freeze a monster like Asmodeus, like that, this guy has to be insane, right? And that's exactly what our protagonist asks. Who are you? Who knows, right? Some call me the king. But you don't need to worry about that, because from now on, I bestow my authority upon you, and obviously, our protagonist is a bit confused. What do you mean, authority? Relax, kid. Just wait patiently for your time. A day when you will understand everything that is to come, and then we will meet again. You are my key. A while after this conversation with the king, he finds it a bit strange, like why is everything black? Damn, he hears a voice calling out to him. What is going on? Bro, until suddenly, bam, wake the hell up. This is Bikryangsu, a bully, who tormented our protagonist's life at school. But how on earth is that bastard? Like Bikryangsu doing? There right now, I don't know either, damn it, but we are going to find out right now, because when our protagonist looks to the side, he sees something pretty interesting. What do you mean, age 19, bro? In other words, he went back 16 years into the past, and completely out of nowhere, our protagonist starts going Joker mode right there, while the redhead starts, thinking he has gone completely crazy, like he got beaten up too much and must have lost his mind. What the hell, but out of nowhere? Boom, after the regression, a massive punch right to the face of Bikryangsu. But this punch wasn't for nothing. Right, because if he went back 16 years into the past, and a system appeared right there, that means he is also an awakened user, my son. And obviously, after Bikryangsu went flying, the two bootlickers, who kiss his ass charge, right at our protagonist with everything, right, my son? But obviously, that's nothing to our protagonist. He dodged the first one, and boom. One is already down, my son, and the second one didn't even stand a chance. Right, because our protagonist lands a flying kick on the guy, and obviously, that was nothing to our protagonist, right, my son? Because that's 35 years of pure experience. Since throughout his entire life as an unawakened person, he did everything he could to become stronger, from physical training to even knowing all the available information about the abyss and the monsters, having knowledge of various skills, and even interpersonal combat. In other words, there's no way he could lose to these two idiots, but it doesn't end there, my son. Truly defeating those two was easy, however. They don't even hold a candle to Beak Ryungsu's abilities. And after taking a massive punch to the face, he gets back up to trade blows with our protagonist, my son. He has the Crank Stone Skin skill. He can strengthen his body with stones that appear on his skin. How bizarre, right? If you stop to think about it, man. So, he charges at our protagonist with everything. But our protagonist manages to dodge everything masterfully. However, he looked away for a split second, and that was enough for Beak Ryungsu to leap forward and boom. But if you thought you defeated our protagonist that easily, you thought wrong, you loser. He used the force in his favor and appears behind Beak Ryungsu. However, it was obvious that Beak Ryungsu would notice and try to hit him with everything. But come on, as if our protagonist would lose that easily. Right, my son? He manages to dodge and lands a clean punch right on Beak Ryungsu. But here's the thing, guys. Since our protagonist didn't use any skill to match Beak Ryungsu's skill, his punch was obviously useless and only served to hurt his own hand. And without wasting any time, boom, Beak Ryungsu lands a massive punch on our protagonist and throws him far away, my son. So that's it, guys. If our protagonist doesn't use any skill, he won't be able to defeat Beak Ryungsu, because everyone who has awakened possesses a skill and a rank, and it's quite simple. To tell you the truth, starting from Frank, which is the same as a normal human, all the way to those who can be called monsters, the famous Shranks, and over time, an awakened user's physical capabilities and skills can increase exponentially. If that's how it is, then why on earth is our protagonist's skill only Frank, the predation skill? And not only is it Frank, right, it's an unknown skill that he has never heard of. But for some reason, he feels like he isn't going to lose this battle. And as soon as our opponent stands up, an insane force begins to emanate from his body. And obviously Beak Ryungsu was impressed, so it's true. The weak Kim Tae-yoon, so this is predation. I can feel the magic power. Moving according to my will, I don't know what's happening, but it will all end once I kill you. And after seeing this insane aura emanating from our protagonist's body, obviously the hothead wasn't just going to stand there. So, he charges right at our protagonist with everything again. However, with just a single raise of his arms, he stops the attack of Beak Ryungsu and shatters his armor. Completely, Beak Ryungsu is finished. And boom, so that's it, guys. It's over, however. After the battle ended there, our protagonist gets a bit glitched out because the system popped up with a notification saying that predation was complete. In other words, now he has the Rhino skill. And not only that, man, the rank of predation, which was F before, is now E. And before I forget, because I already forgot, right, man? This here is our protagonist, Kim Tae-yoon, our skill thief. I'm a thief, man, and a while later, our protagonist thrashed Ryungsu, him and his bootlickers alone. He took them to the infirmary, man. He wouldn't have carried them. He would have let them get screwed. But after being healed by the teacher, he takes off, right? But there's something keeping our protagonist curious, because his skill, which was Frank before, has now suddenly risen to a rank. After a simple battle, what do you mean, boy? And not only that, right? He finally discovered what the use of his skill is, which is to devour other people's skills? Devour? No, right. Hayes straight up stealing it, the rascal. This skill might even be frank, but it outperforms a crank skill. It makes no sense. Boy, this leaves the king even more curious. Right, guys? Why did that guy, the king, give him this power? It makes no sense for him to give this skill to our protagonist and make him go back in time. But anyway, that doesn't matter right now, son, because we're only going to find out about that further. Down the line, what matters now is that finally, our protagonist has returned home again. And of course, that makes him a bit happy, right? Since it's been a while since he last came back. Here, whoa, I can't believe you still haven't liked and subscribed to the channel. I'm watching you. Take advantage of being here and subscribe to the channel in case. You there, little person on the other side of the screen? Become a member. You'll get the videos a day before they're released to everyone. And also the private chat and calls over on our Discord. What's up, my noble friend? Are you going to miss out on all of this? Become a member already? After his parents died in a car accident. Back then, right? He went to live with his aunt and uncle. And his cousin, that total jerk. And relax, you guys will understand what I'm talking about. Very soon, man, as soon as our protagonist enters the house. They're right. He comes face to face with 3 crazy guys. And his cousin's stealing? His uncle's savings? Look at what a jerk. Before our protagonist regressed this brat who deserves a beating. To learn how to live. He wanted to join the bullies group. And to join their group. He needed to prove himself somehow. And that's when he had the great idea to steal. The freaking money from his own parents. Look at what a little jerk, right? Full of I don't. No, man. Everything is already confused in my head, man. And after the little brat says something to those big-eared guys, there, man, he charges at our protagonist, saying that if he doesn't want to get beaten up, he needs to get lost. But that's absolutely perfect for our protagonist, to test his skills. And simply out of nowhere, boom, our protagonist slams his face into the ground. But it didn't end there. He goes after the guy, tries to use the skill, but it doesn't activate, because predation is inaccessible. In other words, our protagonist got screwed over, and the guy was left just like us, right there, not understanding a thing, man. And of course, Hayes not going to just stand there, waiting for the next attack from our protagonist, right? So he does a flying kick from the ground. At our protagonist, I don't even know if that crap even exists, to tell you the truth. A flying kick from the ground? Seriously? And without thinking twice, the 3 of them activate their skills and charge at our protagonist with everything they've got. And of course, it hits him dead on. Boy, did our protagonist kick the bucket, guys? I don't even know, but that's what those guys keep thinking until they see a silhouette in the smoke. Skill usage detected, chain, poison, and bleed confirmed due to a mysterious power. The resistance was successful. In other words, it's time to smash some extra sun. He charges at the big jeered guy, and boom, Hayes down for the count, son. And the other 2, I don't even need to say it, right, guys? They got wrecked too, right? And after smashing the 3 extras, who will never appear in this story again, he keeps wondering why predation didn't activate, especially since he isn't lacking mana. So, since that's the case, factors other than mana must affect the use of the skill. And the strangest thing about all of this is that the passive effect of the predatory skill is not mentioned in the system. And not only that, this damn skill can actually neutralize skills related to abnormal statuses, like bleeding or poisoning. But anyway, our protagonist will have to figure that out later on, because what matters right now is this arrogant brat. And obviously, after seeing this scene of our protagonist crushing all 3 of them, he falls to his knees and starts begging for forgiveness. He looks just like a bitch. In heat, he says hell do anything for our protagonist to forgive him, even lick his shoes or bark like a dog. Whoa, that's crazy. But anyway, our protagonist forgives him and tells him to do something because the real problem isn't this kid. It's what's going to happen today. Meanwhile, in a restricted area, this guy with glasses here was telling the two girls that a gate was suddenly created, meaning a gate breakout has occurred. And it has been over 10 years since he last saw a gate breakout like this. And for those of you who don't know what a gate breakout is, a gate breakout is a phenomenon where monsters appear when a path to the abyss suddenly opens up. And if they leave it the way, it is thousands of people will die. The short-haired girl says that if that's the case, they will invade the neighborhood. Right. But the guy with glasses says there's no need, since they have their brank barrier on their side. And even then, if something happens, the rank of this gate breakout is only crank. However, as he was saying this, their barrier was shattered. But since they are brank, they are more than capable of handling this man. However, that was only what they thought. Because according to our protagonist, the initial mana of this gate really is crank, and the control personnel are brank. So they won't have any trouble with the crank monsters. But that's where the problem lies. What if it isn't a crank dungeon? Heading back to the control personnel, the guy with glasses was finding it a bit strange, because how could a bunch of weak monsters like these break his barrier unless the mana flowing from that gate is above its rank? But it seems he realized it a bit too late, because the gate started to break again, and what came out of it this time was a giant, high-ranking ogre, and in the end, we only see one thing. Going back to our protagonist, the kid was saying that this is ridiculous. How the hell? Does he know all this, man? Our protagonist says it's his intuition talking, so he's not lying, right? But as soon as they arrived there, the kid saw that it was true, because the monsters had already invaded the whole city, man. Our protagonist asks them if they remember what they agreed on. They remember you, you lunatic. Relax, boy. It'll wipe out these damn things. Meanwhile, in one of the tallest buildings, this guy here was telling someone that the gate breakout, they thought, was crank was actually A rank. And at this stage of the game, reinforcements won't be possible, because the other awakened hunters are busy clearing dungeons in the abyss. And the only option for this crisis isn't a rank awakened hunter, meaning you are our only hope. And meanwhile, our protagonist took down the last base monster. And it seems our protagonist's theory was absolutely right. And the reason is pretty simple, to be honest. Predation wasn't activated before because of fatigue, especially because most skills are activated by using mana as a base. However, that doesn't mean you only have to worry about mana. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Right, guys? It's because of fatigue. Because if fatigue reaches its limit, you become unable to use skills or perform physical activities. And the higher it is, the more the skill's power decreases. And your body feels heavy. But our partner discovered something. If he absorbs the monsters that were defeated, he can recover his mana without even using it. But best of all, after our protagonist absorbed the defeated monsters, right there he managed to increase the rank of predation. Look at that, man. Now, predation, which used to be a rank, is now drank, which means the more our protagonist uses predation, the more it will grow. And if he keeps using predation this way, then he could reach Shrank or even the world's first SAS rank. Anyway, now that our protagonist finished clearing the monsters, he was standing there thinking about heading back. Exactly he was. Because out of nowhere, an ogre and a guy fell from the sky, man. This guy who crashed through the building with the ogre is Beak Ryungsu. This is the same guy. Who was talking to that guy? In the building, who said he was their hope? Indeed, maybe he really is their hope. Because the ogre is charging straight at him with everything it's got, son. But obviously, Beak Ryungsu wasn't going to lose that easily, right guys? So, with just one swing of his sword, boom, he managed to defeat the ogre. And in grand style too, son, and obviously. This display of skill leaves our protagonist impressed, right? He really is as strong as our protagonist heard. But these strong people have a small problem. Because they're strong, they tend to lower their guard. And as soon as he lowers his guard, an assassin appears behind him and pierces his chest. But meanwhile, the kid over there managed to save the nurse. However, there's one thing making him curious. How did our protagonist know about all this? Unless, could it be that the king awakened a skill to predict the future? That's so good, man. But anyway, switching back to our protagonist, an insane battle is about to begin with the guy almost dying. He asks who this madman is who pierced his chest. That madman is Han Sang-byum, a brank villain, because in this world, they call awakened who commit crimes villains. And among them, the brank villain Han Sang-byum is a sadistic serial killer who, during a dungeon break, went around taking everyone out. However, this is very strange to our protagonist, because Hei's sure that in this regression of his, they had never met before, so did our protagonist change the future? And obviously, after Baek Ryong-soo found out he was a villain, he prepares to charge at him with everything. But the ogre, which everyone thought was already dead, gets back up absolutely furious at them. But it can't be helped. Right, Han Sang-byum will have to leave the ogre to Baek Ryong-soo, especially since he has already found his new prey. And being bloodthirsty the way he is, damn it, he charges straight at our protagonist with everything, son. But he underestimated our protagonist, thinking he'd defeat him that easily, and boom, just like that, an insane battle between stealth and durability begins. Punches thrown left and right, and sword slashes. All over, but in the end, it looks like our protagonist is getting the upper hand, for now, right son? Because from now on, Han Sang-byum is going to fight seriously. And since Hei's going to fight seriously, what better way than for him to use his stealth skill? Now our protagonist is in trouble, right son? However, even though he disappeared, our protagonist can still sense his presence. And boom, he missed, you loser, and Han Sang-byum cuts through, slashing the knife into our protagonist's arm. But unlike before, he actually managed to wound our protagonist. And obviously the king gets curious, like, what do you mean? He actually cut my arm, man. But Han Sang-byum says that Taeyeon doesn't know how many guys he has kissed goodbye. In this exact same way, those who mistake their skills for absolute invincibility, because this whole invincibility thing doesn't exist. Since every skill has a weakness, and boom, I think things just went sideways for our protagonist. Because who would have thought that Stone Skin would have a weakness? And clearly, Han Sang-byum was counting on this from the very beginning, because he knew that this skill had that exact weakness. However, that was exactly what our protagonist expected. Now Hei's absolutely sure that a Won-on fight is totally possible, even against a brank opponent. From now on, playtime is over, and obviously, after hearing this, Han Sang-byum charges right at our protagonist. He then asks Han Sang-byum if he knows why he wanted to find him, and clearly Han Sang-byum has no idea. What Hei's talking about? The reason is actually quite simple. To tell you the truth, it's because I wanted your skills. This leaves Han Sang-byum completely terrified, because he has never seen a manhwa. As wicked as this one, however, that changes nothing, because it doesn't matter what kind of skill. This is especially since he can't hit what he can't see, but then again, he himself said that his skill has a weakness. Our protagonist realized this. After devouring countless monsters, among those monsters, many would escape his sight. However, it didn't really matter much, because in the end, predation caught all of them. In other words, no matter where you run, predation will always reach you, our protagonist, finishes off Han Sang-beom to steal his ability. Meanwhile, our boy Baek Ryong-soo was on the verge of death, facetto-face with the ogre, and Hei's only in this state because of that stab wound from Han Sang-beom. If it weren't for that stab, he would have definitely defeated the ogre, because even he, an invincible warrior, cannot defy death. So, the ogre prepares to strike with everything it's got. And boom. Could this be the end of our boy Baek Ryong-soo? Of course not, guys. Because our protagonist arrived just in the nick of time and saved Baek Ryong-soo. And using the skill he just stole, on top of that, man, look, I'm a thief, guys, and I don't need to say anything else, right? The ogre bit the dust a few days later in a certain place. Our protagonist was watching the news about the gate breakout and the monsters that invaded the city. And because of the gate breakout and the monsters, the government ordered that nearby schools be closed for a week. Also, as the reports of survivors gradually increase, the public can finally breathe a sigh of relief. And not only that, now, they also have a hero who defeated the giant ogre. However, Baek Ryong-soo just states that he wasn't the one who defeated the giant ogre, and that the real hero is actually someone else. However, since the ogre's corpse wasn't found, and the identity of the villain who attacked the public remains unknown, certain people realize that preventative safety measures are simply not enough, however. This is quite beneficial. For one specific person, our protagonist, of course, because nobody mentioned his name. Anyway, that doesn't matter right now, guys. What matters now is that our protagonist needs to level up. Because now that he has 3 skills, it's getting harder for him to use them. Since if he uses even a bit of these 3 skills, his mana will completely run out. Plus, if he pushes his fatigue too high, he could die, however, the best way to handle this would be potions, but our protagonist is broke, you guys, and doesn't have the cash to buy potions. Because potions are insanely expensive. In other words, he needs to go hunting to make some serious cash, but we have a problem. He needs a legal permit in order to be allowed to hunt, and obviously he doesn't have that legal permission, right, boy? And since that's the case, there's only one option left to explore. The dungeons that haven't been discovered yet, these are the Brank Spider Sisters. Our protagonist was a bit impressed, right? Because they know how to talk, meaning they are heightier monsters. But they are only Brank, which isn't enough, right, for him to raise his rank. So, since that's the case, he will need to eat several of them. Hee boy, and obviously. After hearing that, they got super pissed at our protagonist, and so they prepare an allowed attack and launch it right at our protagonist. But if you guys thought they defeated our protagonist easily, like that, you thought wrong, because nothing happened to our boy. Since Predation successfully resisted the attack, and since it was the Spider Sisters who attacked first, now it's our protagonist's turn to attack, right, buddy? In other words, he who laughs last laughs best. Right, boy? But meanwhile, at the New Korean Awakened Association, this guy here was a bit nervous, because he is two-face with the 2 greatest players in the entire Korea. And before I forget, this guy who's nervous, there is Go Tae-wook, the new registration manager of the Awakened Association. But first of all, what is a player? A player is an awakened person legally permitted to use their skills for various functions, like dungeon exploration, and so on. And currently, they have 5 players at the top of the newly created Awakened Association and among the created guilds. The 4 greats are the Fighters, also called the Invincibles, the Craftsmen, also called the Alchemists, and we can't forget the Mages, also called the Sorcerers, and last but not least, the Informants, also called the Wanderers, and also the Agency, that controls the 4 guilds and all the players. And finally, overall, this is the Awakened Association. And the reason Tae-wook is so nervous like that is because the ones in front of him are This is you, Chaeyoung, the famous guildmaster of the Wanderer Guild, and obviously also an XBO/Shrank player, and the most important of them all, the chairman of the Awakened Association, Eika Xian Jinchul. Exactly like that, man. Imagine. No freaking way I would be able to pronounce that name, man. And before I forget, right? He is also an S-rank player. However, why did the chairman call her out of nowhere like that? The reason is quite simple. To tell you the truth, it's because they discovered something about the malicious guild. And sit tight, because here comes the story, boy. The malicious guild is a criminal organization formed by the most cruel criminals among the villains, and according to the chairman, the members of the malicious guild wear a ring with 3 skulls engraved on them, and not only that, right? They also got a target list that these guys from the malicious guild are after. Clearly, Yu Chaeyoung found that interesting, however. She's sure he didn't call her all the way there just to hand over a document, right, boy? And obviously it wasn't just for that, right, buddy? The truth is, he has another thing he wanted to ask. He wants her opinion on a matter. So he asks her at what age she took the player test. She says it was at the minimum age, which in this case is 19 years old. And obviously that makes her a bit curious. Right, like why is he asking her this? Unless, exactly boy, some high school student is taking on monsters. And I don't even need to say who it is, right guys? A person called the protagonist, man. And speak of the devil, right, our protagonist. Cleared the entire dungeon, buddy. Wow. The boy is evolving, buddy. Check it out. Hello? I want to buy some potions. A few days later, the school closure order ended. And since our protagonist is smart, right, he immediately took advantage of the legal 7 days off to improve his physique. And obviously he didn't just do that, he also cleared more dungeons to improve his skills. Meanwhile, at one of the 4 major guilds, the alchemists were impressed because they had never seen so many magic stones like that. In other words, from now on our protagonist is a VIP customer of theirs, and since he needed it, he exchanged all of that for potions. And also, now the rank of predation is shrank. But anyway, a few days later at school, the nightmare, a lot of people in the comments were saying, no guys, our protagonist was just chilling. There in the classroom, meanwhile, there were other people in the corner talking about him. It seems the gossip about him defeating Bikryungsu and the 2 lackeys who follow him had spread throughout the school. And naturally, that makes them a bit curious. If he defeated Bikryungsu, does that mean he awakened? However, this isn't a good thing for our protagonist, guys. Because out of nowhere, 3 crazy guys arrive, slamming a desk and sitting down. Near him, this is Lee Jung-jae. Whatever, man. You'll just call him Lee or a dickhead. And before I forget, he has also been in Shrank Awakened for a while now. Old friend? Whoa. What do you mean? Old friend. Who is this crazy guy? And how does he know our protagonist? Relax, man. Your boy is going to explain. This guy, Lee Jung-jae, is a 3rd-generation chaebol of the Tyson group. But bro, what is a chaebol? Normally, chaebols are kids from rich conglomerates, meaning, Hei's a rich daddy's boy, that's it. And not only that, Hei's also the leader of the bullies. And being the leader of the bullies, obviously he was the one who ordered Ryungsu to torment our protagonist's life before he regressed. And this makes our protagonist pissed off at him. Someone, like you, a friend, cut the crap and get lost. You bastard. Who do you think you are? And well, Jung-jae punched his lackey right in the face. Just because he interrupted their conversation, however. Jung-jae tells him that he understands that our excited protagonist could defeat Bikryungsu, but you forgot who you were talking to. And obviously, this leaves our protagonist impressed. So this is the power of an S. Rank, it could be interesting in his hands. That being said, it's time to steal his skill. But just as our protagonist was about to steal his skill, someone arrives. They're telling them to stop this girl. Here is Yu Lin, and yes, she is the younger sister of Yu Chai Yung, that hot guild master of the Wanderer Guild, but she's not. Just Yu Chai Young's sister, she's also in Shrank Awakened. And not only that, bro, she also has several nicknames, class president, Yu Chai Young's younger sister, Shrank Awakened, and blah blah blah, even with all these nicknames. She has a bit of a problem. She is inflexible as hell, he asks her. What she means by stop, because I didn't do anything. We're just friends having a chat. And obviously Yu Lin doesn't believe that. Either you leave on your own, or I make you leave. By force, and obviously that ugly bastard. Jung Jai gets pissed off at her. However, Jung Jai turns around and says he has no intention of fighting her. Right there, or does he? Especially since Hei's not that kind of person. And just when an insane battle between ice and fire was about to begin, an announcement from the broadcasting club interrupts them, saying that a lecture will be hosted by the Awakened Association in the auditorium, meaning everyone needs to go there, bro. And of course, after Li Zhongjai heard it was the Awakened Association, Hei's going to leave this little fight for later. And as soon as Li Zhongjai leaves, Yu Lin asks if our protagonist is okay, but when she looks, bro, our protagonist is already at the door, leaving. He asks what she's doing just standing there. Didn't she hear the announcement? And obviously, she gets a bit confused, like, wait, what, bro? But anyway, over at the lecture, the students were a bit confused. Right, like what the Awakened Association is doing there? Could it be because of the gate breakout? That's what we're going to find out now, right? Because Go Tai-wook, that guy from the Awakened Association, he is only there for two reasons. The first one is for him to apologize for the lack of response from the Awakened Association, and the second reason, it's very simple, it's to inform them about the change in the player tests, and obviously, this will leave them even more confused. Like, what do you mean, player test? What does that have to do with them? That's what we're going to find out now, right? Because Tai-wook says that due to the recent surge in gate breakouts and the rapid rise in the number of monsters in dungeons, the Awakened Association realize that they are short-handed, and because of that, they will allow high school students to take the player tests, and this makes the students all happy. Right, because they will be able to take the player tests. However, Tai-wook says that, yes, in fact, the tests will indeed be open to high schoolers. But the selection process has already begun, having said this, he activates his skill called Eye of Observation. The Eye of Observation is a skill capable of quantifying the total sum of the target's abilities. After focusing, and not only that, man, this skill is so broken that he can see the target's status window. Anyway, Tai-wook was impressed, right? Because the numbers. They are much better than in other schools. But clearly, the most shocking among them all are Li Jung. Jay with his incredible 1,924 power score. And clearly, the strongest of them all, Yu Lin, with her incredible 2,335 power score. This leaves Go Tai-wook impressed, right, son? So there's no way around it. He will have to write a recommendation letter as soon as he returns. But while Go Tai-wook was analyzing the people, there, Li Zhongjai raised his hand. He says that Go Tai-wook was going to inform him about the player test. However, some people here are not fit for that, and Hei's talking about the player tests, especially because these tests are meant to evaluate suitable individuals to be players among the awakened. In other words, he believes that unawakened pieces of trash don't need to listen to this lecture. What a jerk. But why is that dickhead Li Jung guy saying this? To tell you the truth, it's quite simple, right? It's because strength isn't everything that makes a player. There are various aspects that shape such a player, whether it's their awakened status or even the ability to lead in various different situations. And they also have a vast knowledge about the abyss. In other words, to become a player. A complex set of skills must be evaluated. But it's like that, right? For an unawakened person, this is nothing but rubbing salt in the wound. What a jerk. Man, he just had to be a daddy's boy, damn it. And after hearing this, Yulin even tries to help our boy. But look at his face, guys. See if he even wants help, man. Damn it. Stop sending messages, dude. And after this little spat, Go Tai-wook says he understands what Hei's saying. But it doesn't depend on me, right? It depends on whether the player wants to listen to the lecture or not after that. Lee Jun-jae asks, if our protagonist doesn't feel humiliated, damn. I hate this guy, man. I feel like telling him to screw off. Tai-wook finds this interesting. He is an shrank player, and Hei's looking down on others. How pathetic. And after observing closely, he got interested in our protagonist, Kim Taeyeon, right? And just like he did with all the others. He tries to analyze our protagonist, right, boy? However, the information cannot be verified. Or he says that Lee Jung-gae is right. He didn't take into consideration what use a mere unawakened person would have? In participating in such a lecture, is it really about leaving and hurting their pride, since it's like that? Hei's going to get the hell out of here on his own. What a joke, you jerk, moving back to Taeyuki. He was left a bit glitched out, because since his observation, eyes didn't work. They worked even on President Nayu. But they didn't work on this kid. What do you mean, boy? So he just turns around and walks away. But anyway, before he leaves, he has to show his skills. As soon as our protagonist allows Taeyuki to use his observation skills on him, he gets totally dazed. Because our protagonist has an incredible 5096 power level, my son. A while later, in the library, our protagonist was trying to find something about this predation, skill, and also about this so-called king giving godlike powers. To him, right? But obviously, he didn't find anything, my son, because nobody has ever heard of a skill that devours other skills. But this part of us, trying to find something out, came to an end, because Lee Jung-jae's goons already arrived saying that ugly Lee Jun-jae is looking for him. And if he even thinks about not going with them, the one who's going to suffer won't be him, but his aunt boy. And after hearing this, it'll only say, one thing, guys, it's over, Daunt. Make me repeat myself, you piece of trash. Where's that damn Lee Jung? Jay, a while later in the gymnasium, the bald guy was impressed because he didn't trigger the traps. With status effects, but that doesn't work on our protagonist, my son. Before I forget, this bald guy is an erring hunter, you guys. Whom I'm going to keep calling? The bald guy and Lee Jung-jae only did this to confirm his hypothesis about whether our protagonist had awakened or not. And now that he confirmed this hypothesis, he says he won't hurt our protagonist. He just wants to talk to him, talk my foot. To tell you the truth, what ugly Lee Jung-jae wants is to recruit our protagonist. And Hei's only trying to recruit our protagonist, because down the line, he intends to create a guild. As soon as he graduates as the heir of the Tizen group, right, he says a genius like him can't do everything. Alone, he asks our protagonist if he understands what Hei's saying, truly talented people, not a total bum like Baek Ryung. Sue, but truly talented people. Like you, who's laughing, and completely out of nowhere. He starts going full Joker right there, man. Talking about how he forgot a little bit of what happened in the past, and working for him, but our protagonist doesn't. Give a damn about that, my son. Especially since he didn't go there just to have a little chat, boy. Anyway, there's no way around it. It went exactly how Lee Jung-jae thought dogs need to be trained. And from now on, an insane battle is about to begin between fire and the power of the king. But before this insane battle begins, the bald guy sets up a barrier right there, and from now on, nobody can notice that they are fighting in there. In other words, man. Our protagonist can beat the crap out of Lee Jung-jae. since nobody is going to see it. But now returning to the battle, our protagonist and Lee Young, Jay are in a frantic battle, where skills are clashing with incredible force. So our protagonist charges at him with everything. But obviously, Lee Jun-jae won't back down, and boom, an incredible clash of skills happens. However, it was obvious that Lee Jun-jae's skill is stronger, and obviously the king felt the attack. But the problem wasn't that he felt the attack. The problem is that he got distracted, boy. And obviously, this distraction was perfect for Lee Jun-jae to prepare a kick, and boom. But if you thought you defeated our protagonist, you're dead wrong, my son. Because our protagonist charges at him again with everything. However, according to the bald guy, there's no way our protagonist can defeat Lee Jun-jae because Lee Jun-jae's skill is way higher, while our protagonist's skill is just a skin-strengthening ability, and boom, Lee Jun-jae hits our protagonist dead on. However, there is something strange happening. Jay stops out of nowhere, and obviously our protagonist wasn't going to miss this opportunity, right? And obviously, the guy is completely stunned. What do you mean the young master lost in physical combat? It seems our protagonist finally managed to use his other skill, especially since, as you guys already know, he has 3 skills that he got from the stone. And he only didn't use the skill before because this paralysis skill is crank, and clearly, it managed to pierce and shrank skill, just like that. Easily, right? And that's when Taeyeon had an idea. A very simple idea, to be honest, but effective. Right, our protagonist's goal was to stack paralysis through physical combat. Because for those of you who don't know, status effect. Skills have a much greater effect when used in direct attacks instead of ranged attacks. And even if it's in shrank awakened, sooner or later the skill would work. And this leaves the bald guy even more stunned. This kid is a genius. But the fight isn't over yet, son. Because Jung-jae says, he admits, he underestimated our protagonist. So from now on, Hae's going to fight seriously. You see, man? He can't win this with his bare hands. So he has to use a little item his daddy gave him, right? The bald guy tells him to stop. Because if he doesn't stop, hell, kill our protagonist, son. Shut up, as a mere bodyguard. How dare you order me around? This filthy piece of trash humiliated me. Do you really think I'm going to let this slide? And boom, he hits our protagonist dead on, and worried about our protagonist. The guy goes over to try and help him. But boom, take that for being a fool. Our protagonist doesn't want help, son, because from now on, Hae's also going to fight seriously, boy. Meanwhile, at the Awakened Association, the chairman was impressed with the numbers of you. And Jung-jae, wait, no, damn, Taeyeon's is right there, he says, that it really is impressive. Without a doubt, these two are shrank. Awakened, one of the ladies there is impressed at this rate. Isn't he on the same level as the Saint of Japan? The Saint, one of the top players in Japan, is a monster, whose stats exceed 2,500. Since her first evaluation at 19 years old, that's right, son, at 19 years old. Even in the case of that monster, she barely exceeded 2,500. However, that boy with 5,096 is far beyond that. But before he reports to the chairman, he needs to verify this with his own eyes. Returning to the insane battle between Jung-jae and our protagonist, the bald guy was impressed. Because our protagonist's skill was swallowing Jung-jae's skill, Jung-jae even tries to use all his power to try and neutralize our protagonist's skill. But it's not that easy, son. Our protagonist says that it doesn't matter. If Hae's an heir or a high rank, to be honest, that's nothing. Because this is the power of the king. And in the end, we only see one thing, guys. Sometime later, the bald guy was begging our protagonist not to do anything to that dickhead Jung-jae, because if it wasn't for the bald guy, Jung-jae would be dead right now. The bald guy asks our protagonist. What Hei's going to do now? Since Jung Jae is the heir to Taizan. However, our protagonist says he wasn't the one. Who looked for a fight? Look closely. At his face, does he look like someone? Who would run away from a threat like this? Of course, our protagonist isn't going to kill him. But since Hei's the heir to Taizan, it would only be fair to receive a price for his life, wouldn't it? Let's see. I should get at least 1 billion won. Don't. You agree? Our protagonist is such a savage. Oh no. Hei's really going through with it. Meanwhile, outside, the teacher was trying to calm the students down. And obviously Yulin gets a bit curious, because those flames don't look like Jung Jae's. But then, who is it that he was facing in her head? Lee Young. Jae is humiliating our protagonist. Little. Does she know that our protagonist completely thrashed Lee Jung Jae, right, man? And obviously, after deducing this, she rushes out to see what's happening, son. But as soon as she gets there, it wasn't what she was expecting, because Lee Jung Jae was down. And our protagonist was standing like, what? Obviously. She gets curious and asks, bro, what happened? The king says that he simply fell down the stairs, man. Man, what a blatant lie, man. Do you guys really think Yulin would believe that, guys? Of course not, man. However, as soon as she looks, our protagonist was no longer there. What is he? A god? The Flash? A while later, already far from the gym, the king was a bit impressed, because he got an interesting skill called Monarch's Heart. And not only that, he also got a new attribute called Charm. Wait, how does Lee Jung Jae have something like this, man? Hei's such an asshole, man. However, that doesn't matter right now, because our protagonist is a bit curious. Because the skill he got wasn't Fire Heart, but Monarch's Heart. It's a skill where he can increase the group's attributes. This leaves our protagonist even more curious. Like, how does Lee Jung Jae have a skill like this? But our protagonist doesn't really care about that, because this is great for him, especially since skills that affect a whole group are rare nowadays. And for our protagonist, who uses multiple skills, Monarch's Heart is perfect. But to ruin our protagonist's vibe, several cars arrive there, and you guys already know who it is, right, guys? It's that guy from the Awakened Association. Taeyuk, man, hey. What did you do in the gym? Earlier, meanwhile, in a certain mansion, the bald guy was explaining to Lee Jung Jae's father everything that happened, and obviously, he gets furious with our protagonists. Because besides putting his son in the hospital, Hei's asking for money for his son's life. The guy is almost shitting his pants, so scared that you couldn't drive a needle through. He says he has nothing more to say. So, since that's the case, Lee Jung Jae's father already tells the guy to do what our protagonist requested. However, I want you to put out a bounty. For the same price we are paying him, the guy tries to say that his opponent is just a kid and this and that, and blah blah blah. It would be too cruel. Enough. I won't tolerate a barking dog. That guy is an SHHN player. I am the chairman of the Taizan group, and also Lee Jung Jae's father, damn it. Damn. Returning to our protagonist and Taeyuk. What did you do in the gym, boy? However, our protagonist got a bit curious, because he doesn't know if Hei's talking about the explosion in the gym or about the accident in class. But since Taeyuk is a manager of the association, he shouldn't be involved in this mess, right? There's no other choice, right, son? Our protagonist. We'll have to do a test, guys. The gym, are you talking about the explosion? However, clearly that wasn't what Taeyuk was talking about, so since it's not the explosion, does that mean Taeyuk already knows all this? This leaves Taeyuk a bit intrigued. What do you mean, actually? It's pretty simple. If Hei's not there, because of the explosion, there's only one reason for him to be there, and it's because he wants to invite our protagonist to take the hunter test. However, Taeyuk gets a bit confused. You're saying that based on What, boy? Based on? Isn't this number already? Enough for you, and obviously. Taeyuk was impressed, right, son? Because our protagonist is already stronger than before now. Taeyuk is certain that the previous numbers weren't. A mistake a while. Later at our protagonist's house, his little friend was impressed. With him, since Hei's going to be able to take the hunter tests, and because of that, he keeps thinking our protagonist is a king. Are you pulling my leg? But this is also great for our protagonist, right guys? Because the Tizen group will settle the issues with the gym. Right, and that should be enough. To diminish the few suspicions regarding Taeyeon, and since the test is a month from now, he just needs to focus on training, right? Become a bodybuilder. Boy, let's go then. Therefore, from now on, he shouldn't have any problems. However, meanwhile, outside our protagonist's house, there were two guys who were a bit curious, because why on earth would an association player need a kid's house? Meaning the only reason is that he is a student who will participate in the tests. Those two guys, they are from a Twelman assassination unit. The Black and White brothers, but just when they were almost losing their minds, they're thinking about attacking our protagonist. In the end, it wasn't necessary, son, because our protagonist arrived and thrashed them, and obviously, the other guy seeing his brother getting a beating, son. He goes after our protagonist. With everything right, but obviously, our protagonist wouldn't. Let him right and well a few hours earlier at the gym. After our protagonist smashed it was Junjae's guys. The bald guy was angry with our protagonist, right, son? What do you mean 1 billion? He can't ask his boss for that otherwise. Hell bite the dust, right? In addition to keeping quiet about the matter, he wants the charge to keep the young master alive, however. Our protagonist says he doesn't give a damn about that, son. Especially because Hei's not a jerk, who goes around shifting the blame to subordinates. Man, the protagonist went hard there. The only thing our protagonist wants is for him to reach an agreement, however. Just in case you think about betraying me, because we sealed a contract, and breaking it will result in a random penalty. In other words, guys, the guy has no choice, right? Either he gets screwed on the right side, or he gets screwed on the left side, man. However, that was just the basics. Because it's not over yet, right, son? Speaking of the 1 billion, our protagonist has 2 conditions. To put in this contract, nothing that happened there regarding this battle with that dickhead Jung Jae, and our protagonist can leave, and already on the next day, they were reporting that the fire at the gym was because of a gas leak. The second condition is very simple. He has to report everything about what his boss is doing to our protagonist, and that was basically the reason why our protagonist knew that the Black and White brothers wanted to attack him. Now returning to our protagonist. Hei's in a frantic battle with one of the brothers. The boy goes after him with everything, but obviously the guy is stealthy, right, son? He dodges and appears behind our protagonist. Now it's his turn to attack, right? He goes after our protagonist with everything, and boom, well, Black and White brothers. I heard you guys were strong. However, from what I've seen, you guys are pieces of trash, aside from your stealth. But meanwhile, in traffic, Yu Chae-young was talking to the chairman on her cell phone, asking if Hei's anxious to see someone. He says, of course, right, Jung Jae is quite strong. But the person Hei's most interested in seeing is Chae-young's sister, however. Chae-young says her family doesn't tolerate anything less than that. Right there you go, guys. Just the way. You like it, Manahati? Who stomps on you, then she continues, saying that she heard something amusing. And obviously, the chairman got curious. What do you mean, amusing? Concerning the other, Shrank awakened. She says that Taewook met with a student. In person, aren't you also curious, Chairman? How skilled does someone need to be for him to take the initiative? Returning there to our protagonist, he defeated the Black and White brothers easily, right? However, now we have a problem, boy. The physical capacity for predation is insufficient. And because of that, he can no longer use Predation due to the overload. A while later, our protagonist called Chian Jinchil to learn about the Black and White brothers. He asks our protagonist if he can imagine anyone behind this attack. Our protagonist thinks for a moment and says no. Chian Jinchil gets curious, wondering if the list of participants leaked, but our protagonist doesn't even care about that, because that doesn't matter right now. What matters to him right now is how he is going to solve this problem with predation, especially since it doesn't make much sense either. Like, how can he not use predation? Because of his physical abilities? And clearly, this leaves him a bit confused. Could it really be that he needs to increase his stats? But we have a small problem. They're right for him to prey on monsters. He needs predation. And it's the same thing with the awakened. To prey on the awakened, he needs predation. So if that's the case, how is he going to do that, bro? That's what we are going to find out right now, guys. Because according to our protagonist, there's only one way. A while later at the gym, this girl here was welcoming our protagonist. However, when she sees our protagonist and the blockhead, there, she says, that place isn't for them, that is, until he tries to show his VIP card. Our boy is powerful now, son. But even with the alchemist's VIP card, she is a bit hesitant to let our protagonist enter. There, but completely out of nowhere, a bodybuilder in the background says that money alone isn't enough to let our protagonist in there. This bodybuilder, who spoke up, is a ranked trainer, and though Hay's not an actual player, he calls himself the Iron Man. No way, man. And of course, everyone was impressed. Except for our protagonist, right? Just look at his face. His expression turned green with annoyance. The Iron Man says that as he can see, everyone trembles when they hear his name. Oh my God. The guy is lying if you leave. Right now, I can forgive you, but our protagonist is mocking him. As always, right guys? A little piece of crap is barking. And clearly after hearing that, the Iron Man got pissed off at him. You dare to say that I am weaker? Our protagonist says that if he doesn't believe him, they can make a bet. The bet is very simple. The loser pays for a 1-year membership for the winner. And obviously, the bodybuilder got excited about that. Let's go, kid. What, a bodybuilder a while? Later, they were in a place that looks like the Abyss. The blockhead got a bit curious, like how are they in the Abyss, however? Obviously, it's a virtual reality program called the Virtual Gate. The Virtual Gate is an exact replica of the Abyss. And the objective of the challenge is actually quite simple. They will have to eliminate as many brank monsters as they can, but if it were just that, it would be fine. They really have to eliminate the monsters. But they have to reach the finish line while carrying the maximum weight in the shortest time possible. And according to the brunette, there, our protagonist is at a major disadvantage against the Iron Man. Oh my God, man, I can't take this name seriously, dude. Meanwhile, the big bleed guy is over there smashing the monsters, thinking he won, however. Our protagonist swept right past him, destroying all the monsters with the heaviest weight on his back. In other words, in the end, you already know what happened, right, guys? Our protagonist won, son. A few days later, the reporter was saying that this day, the long-awaited day, that everyone was finally waiting for, has arrived, the player licensing examination. Meanwhile, this woman was desperate because she is very far away. And if she can't cover this story, she will be fired. But while she was lamenting right there on the ground, like, I couldn't interview anyone, who appears in the background, the man himself, our protagonist, damn, and without missing the opportunity, she crawls on the ground there and asks if she can interview our protagonist. Poor guy, man. A while later, our protagonist arrived late because of the interview with the reporter, but he managed to arrive with 1 minute left. Look at that, man. And guys, as soon as our protagonist enters, man, there are people. Everywhere there are so many people they don't even fit on the screen, man. But anyway, while our protagonist was chilling, there Yu Lin approaches him, and she gets a bit confused. How did our protagonist get so tall and strong like this out of nowhere, huh? He says it's just from a bit of exercise. Right, the crazy guy became a bodybuilder. Man, and this makes Yulin even more curious. She heard that he awakened. But is there anyone who changes this much in just 1 month? But while Yulin was there curiously asking our protagonist how he changed so fast, the broadcast begins. Because the challenge is about to start, everyone, welcome. This is the first testing ground that will select those who will become the new players. And here are the rules for the first test. He tells them to look at their chests because each one of them has a selected plate with a number on it. And this first challenge is very simple. They will have to collect 5 of these plates, including their own. In other words, if you don't have your own plate, you are out, boy. The time limit will be just 1 hour. Any method is allowed except murder. In that case, let the challenges begin. And obviously after the challenge starts, clearly everyone is going after Yulin because she is the strongest there, right, man? If they can defeat her, they will finish off everyone else. However, it wouldn't be that easy to defeat our girl Yulin like that. It's no wonder that her new nickname right now is the New Saint. One of the guys watching the students there, he says he only has his eyes on one person, the Shrank Shinyun Suok. And obviously they get a bit curious. Because which of them will do better in the test, Yulin or Shin Yun-suk? Well, anyway, I don't know, man. We'll find out later. Because the only person Taiho is interested in is our protagonist, Man. And as soon as he sees our protagonist fighting, he is impressed because Kim Taeyeon is fighting against a cranker. And let's face it, that's weak, right? This leaves Taiho a bit confused. What do you mean? Did he misjudge Kim Taeyeon's skills? He doesn't believe that a mere cranker is going toe-to-toe against him? Wait, he didn't dodge a single attack. Exactly. Taiho, that's just training for our protagonist. And even after a month of intense training, he couldn't remove the seal on predation. And the reason for that is actually quite simple. It's because his stats are still not high enough. And there was only one way for him to increase his stats, without using predation, which is to push his body until it can't take it anymore. In other words, that means fighting to the absolute limit. And clearly, in the end, our protagonist defeated that crank-awakened hunter. Kim Taeyeon currently has 2 plates. Taiho, who was watching, wasn't impressed by that, because the guy is simply training during a test. Man, the guy is insane, man. You can't deny it. Taiho says that at this moment, the best strategy would be to conserve energy and eliminate the weakest links. But wait, exactly, guys. Our protagonist is going after one of the strongest challengers, the Shrank Shin Yun-seok, who has plates in his possession 1, 4, 7. In other words, if our protagonist defeats this ugly guy, then he passes the test right there, man. However, we have a problem, right, boy? How is our protagonist going to defeat this crazy guy? Without predation, man. But our protagonist doesn't care about that at all. Man, just like that. He charges at the crazy guy with everything he's got, man. However, I don't know, it won't be that easy to defeat this guy like that, right? But what matters is that Shin Yun-seok is having fun, because he thought Yulin was the only one that could entertain him. But it seems he was wrong, because the king was there this whole time. The king manages to dodge all of his attacks masterfully and charges right at the guy with everything. And boom, however, our protagonist's kick didn't even manage to get close to Shin's face. And boom, it looks like our protagonist has run into a huge problem. Right, guys, because this Thunder God's skill is pretty tricky to deal with, since he doesn't just surround himself with powerful lightning that blocks attacks, but it also has a destructive power that allows him to fight, both at close range and from a distance. And since he can't use predation, how is he going to defeat this crazy guy? Our protagonist says, "What the hell, why aren't you coming to me? It'll just come to you then?" And by a very narrow margin, Our protagonist manages to dodge his attack. However, it didn't end there. With everything throwing multiple attacks, however, our protagonist manages to dodge all of them. Still, just running away doesn't solve anything, and sooner or later he would get caught by Shin's attack. But obviously our protagonist wasn't just going to stand there and take the hits. He creates a giant stone hand right there and boom. But as you guys already know, right guys? This type of attack has no effect on Shin, so Shin leaps into the air and prepares his strongest attack, launching it at our protagonist and hitting him deaden. However, our protagonist isn't going to give up that easily. Shin is completely impressed by this. How is he resisting this boy? What an interesting toy. But out of nowhere, boom. He manages to hit Shin. Shin was just like us. Right there, totally clueless, man. But Shin doesn't have time to think about that, my son, because our protagonist is already behind him, so he grabs 2 more stones, and boom. Boom. He manages to hit Shin again. He gets a bit glitched out because he doesn't know how our protagonist is hitting him, however. The reason is simple. Stone skin, really, isn't compatible with the fury of the thunder god. But in this place, it's totally different, because this place is made of a material that can withstand the attack of an awakened user. And since he can't use stone skin to hit Shin, he just uses the arena itself, my son, and boom, oh my god. Man, this guy's a genius, my son. And just like that, our protagonist defeats Shin. Now, he just needs to grab the cards and finish the test. At least that was what he expected. Because out of nowhere, he gets attacked by someone, and Hayes, a bit curious. Since this isn't ice and completely out of nowhere, an ice dome is formed around our protagonist. And yes, guys, there's only one person there who has ice powers, Weakling. And for some reason, she is absolutely furious with our protagonist, my son, and out of nowhere. She says she believes that with great power comes great responsibility. She says our protagonist is pretty strong. She would never imagine he could defeat Shin. Like that, curiously. Our protagonist asks why she attacked him out of the blue like that, and out of nowhere. She gets super pissed at our protagonist, and says that Hayes probably also. The one who defeated the ogre like that? Why did you lie to me? And bam, and by a very narrow margin. Taeyeon manages to dodge this attack, however. By the time he did, there were already several aerial attacks heading straight for him. And even if he uses stealth, it won't do any good. And when he least expected it, Weakling appears right in front of him and kicks him dead in the face. She says that she thought our protagonist was different from that piece of trash, that he wouldn't act recklessly, solely for his own self-interest. But after seeing you fight, I understood everything. In the end, Lee Young, Jae and Baekryongsu, all of this was your fault. And boom. She keeps talking, saying she'll want report our protagonist. After everything Hayes been through, however, withdraw from the player licensing examinations, because you don't deserve to be a player. And who the hell do you think you are to say that? Stop talking crap. You couldn't even stop blabbering about responsibility and deserving. Even after saying all that, all you want is to eliminate me. I'd prefer it if you used survival in the test as an excuse instead of being so pathetic. And after hearing those words from our protagonist, she got super pissed at him, so, since that's the case, she is going to fight seriously, son, and it seems things got bad for our protagonist, right guys? Because after his stone skin broke time and time, again, it lost its function. And even if he uses stealth, he will be found by the aerial attacks and the attribute boost given by the king's heart isn't enough to turn the tables, and even pushing his body to the absolute limit in battle. Predation is still sealed. And since Hayes out of stamina, he won't be able to use paralysis like he did against Lee Junjae. In the end, there's only one thing he can do. Boy, so he charges at Weakling with everything, and their attacks clash, causing an explosion. And in the end, everyone was completely mind-blown. because our protagonist is kissing Yulin. I can't believe it. Man, but let's rewind this a little bit, right, boy? When the boy charged at her, she tried to hit him, however. The boy jumped upward, right, boy? And there was only one way. For him to try to affect her with the paralysis, which would be with a kiss, right, son? And as you guys already know, status effect skills that inflict abnormal states are better used at close range, rather than long range, and applied directly, not indirectly, has an extremely high chance of success. So, genius as our protagonist is, right, son? He infused the paralysis into his blood and made Yulin swallow it. That's so gross, man. And in the end, you already know what happened, right, guys? Our protagonist left Yulin totally blushing and won the battle, man. And after this last battle, the first test ended after that. All the injured people were healed. And even though Yulin lost and was paralyzed, she still had her plates. So she passed the test, right? However, the most impressive part of it all is our protagonist, right, son? Even with only 7 plates, he single-handedly, unexpectedly defeated Shin Yun-seok and Yulin. And obviously, this makes our protagonist famous, right, son? With everyone talking about him, however. As our protagonist was walking there, out of nowhere, Yun-seok jumps at him, completely furious with him, however. Our boy manages to block it easily, right? And out of nowhere, everyone starts cheering for Yoon-suk. Finish him off, damn it. Meanwhile, shut the hell up, however. When our boy Shin Yun-seok throws hands again, there's someone stops them with gravity power. This guy right here who's using gravity power isn't a Shrank player, Park Sung-jin. He finds it quite interesting. Look at that, man. There's still someone standing close by. So, since that's the case, how about increasing the pressure a little bit? He increases the gravity power on our protagonist, but our protagonist doesn't back down, seeing that Sung-jin gets interested in our protagonist, especially because not even veterans could endure this much as he increases the gravity. To test our protagonist, someone arrives. They're telling him to stop. What the hell are you doing, Sung-jin? Are you going crazy? It was just a test, man. But before leaving, he asks what our protagonist's name is. My name is Kim Tae-yun. And he gets even more interested, right, son? Because he knows it was our protagonist who defeated Shin Yoon-suk. It's been a while since someone left. Him this interested? He'll be waiting for you, kid. He takes off running some time. Later, all ready at the next test. Sung-jin is asking if they are ready, because from now on, they are going to start the next player test. Their next test is right ahead. Behind him is a drank dungeon. Participants will enter the dungeon in groups of 5, along with a supervisor, and all of their actions will be observed. Combat, observation, wisdom, and obviously, caution and rescue efforts. They will be allowed to use any type of weapon provided. By the association, and obviously, Taeyeon gets excited. After all, there shouldn't be any problems. Since it's just a drank dungeon, right? Unless it turns out to be a double dungeon. An apocalyptic dungeon. And shrank apocalyptic dungeon inside a drank dungeon. At the player testing facility, the world's first double dungeon was discovered. Thousands of people were massacred, including the first group that discovered it. This escalated into dungeon breaks. And obviously, the first group is our protagonist's group. There's no escaping it, son. Hei's going to have to deal with his own problems. As soon as our protagonist enters, Hei's the last of the 5 that was missing. And this guy here is Instructor Hakes. I'm absolutely certain I pronounced that wrong. My bad. And unfortunately for our protagonist, man, this guy was the first to discover the apocalyptic dungeon. No way, man. It looks like our protagonist is out of luck. A while later, the rookies are smashing the monster's son. And after this demonstration, Instructor Hakes was impressed with them. However, that's not what's leaving our protagonist impressed. Son, what's leaving our protagonist impressed? Is Instructor Hex's ring, the ring Hei's wearing, on his finger. Holy crap, it's the unique Runk Sage's ring. It increases strength, stamina, speed, and mana by 10 times. Seriously, that's no joke. Its incredible artifacts from Double Dungeons are truly very strong. A while later, they were walking casually through the cave, but they stop. After they encounter two different paths, a kid there asks Instructor Hakes what they're going to do now, and he starts saying that he should consider a vote, and blah 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 blah, but while he was talking, their Taeyun just walks right past them, son. Hey, come back. You can't go alone, you lunatic. It's fine. Man, just follow me, son. And clearly, Yulin wasn't going to stay behind, right? So everyone starts following our protagonist until out of nowhere, guys, they find a double dungeon. The guy with the mask tells them to go check out what's inside, but our protagonist tells them to stop. Are you guys crazy? Or what, son? Then Taeyeon tells Instructor Hakes that they should report this to the association. He says yes, that by the rules they should report this to HQ. However, they're going to try just this once. Who cares about rules? Screw that. I only have one thing to say, guys. Everyone is going to die, man. Instructor Hakes keeps talking, saying that it's just the sum of drinks. And besides, if anything happens, an Urink player is right there, right? And exploring this will definitely give you guys good points. What a son of a bitch, then. Taeyeon asks if he shouldn't follow the rules. Rules, a solo player who isn't even in a team is saying this, and the others start getting pissed off at our protagonist too, saying that even if he is a bit skilled, he needs to know his place. So it's decided they are going to enter the dungeon. Man, I'm sure everyone is going to die, and only our protagonist will stay alive, man. And just like that, Instructor Hakes snaps his fingers, and they enter the dungeon. However, they were terrified by what they saw, because what stands before them is a giant statue, son. They start saying a bunch of things, but our protagonist tells them to shut up and pay attention to what stands before them, and simply out of nowhere, two statues appear in front of them. And obviously they start to panic. Even Instructor Hakes is scared. See, you fool? Who told you to enter? So? And obviously they start to panic. Even Instructor Hakes is scared. See, you idiot. Who told you to go in there then? He shouts to everyone. Prepare for battle. Then the knights charge at them with everything they've got. Meanwhile, Instructor Hakes dodges and manages to paralyze them with flame thorns. And just like that, everyone starts launching their attacks at the knights. And in the end, they manage to defeat the two knights at least. That's what they thought. Because in the background, 4 more appeared a while later. They managed to defeat those 4, however. An army of soldiers is coming in their direction. Meanwhile, while our protagonist analyzed the situation, he noticed something strange. So, he goes up to Instructor Hakes and says something is wrong, and obviously, Instructor Hakes is impressed by him. Because after all this fighting, our boy isn't even tired. Besides, he was also the first to notice that this gate was dangerous. Didn't you hear me, you bastards? And finally, if it weren't for the attributes of the king, the monarch's heart, they wouldn't have even endured this fate. Our protagonist, says Hayes, just guessing, but these are not Death Knights. But wait, if they aren't Death Knights, what are they? That's what our protagonist is about to find out. Now, son, he grabs a sword. There, activates the stone skin skill, and charges at the monsters with everything, son. And obviously the knights would retaliate against the attack, right guys? However, our protagonist jumped up high and smashes down on the giant tortoises with everything, bam. And in the end, guys, all this time, all this fighting they had with the knights, in the end, it was all an illusion. And after dispelling the illusion, Instructor Hakes asks our protagonist how he knew it was a trap, especially since he must have never faced a Death Knight before. It's simple. There's no way they would be this weak. A while later, they were walking through the cave. to see if they could find an exit. However, what they found was a giant door. But there's no choice, bro. They will have to enter this door, because the gate is beyond it anyway, one way or another. They open the door, bro, and as soon as they enter, they encounter a real Death Knight. Until that kid there says, "Ha, ha, it's just one." However, out of nowhere, several knights start appearing before them, and skull torches start lighting up, and when they look again, there are hundreds and hundreds of real Death Knights. Well, you inferior humans actually made it this far. So be it. Let the battle begin. The master of the apocalyptic double dungeon, the leader of the Death Knights and Shrank Monster now. I want to see what they are going to do, son, because the Death Knights are prepared to charge at them, son. And from the looks of it, the Death Knights want a duel. A Wanion, however. As always, that guy who won't shut his damn mouth says he can't, especially since he doesn't have any mana left. But our boy tells him to calm down and this and that. However, when he looks back, those guys are already running away, son. What a bunch of idiots, man. But it is what it is, guys. It wouldn't be that easy to escape from the Death Knights. Sure enough, son. One of them gets ready and takes down those ugly cowards for good. Now, only our protagonist, the girl, and Instructor Hakes are left. So our protagonist starts shouting to Instructor Hakes there that he will buy some time for him and this and that, blah, blah, blah. However, while our protagonist was speaking, Instructor Hakes pushed him out and used a stone wall to separate the two of them. And clearly our protagonist would get pissed off at him, right? Asking what the hell he is doing. But Instructor Hakes tells him to shut his mouth. You're not even a licensed player yet. Know your place, kid. And clearly, this leaves our boy confused, because what the hell is this guy doing, man? Instructor Hakes says that he really wanted to become an SHNC player. It didn't matter how much he trained or improved his skills. He was far from reaching that level, and it kept getting further and further out of reach. When he saw the double dungeon, he really thought this was his chance. If he could handle this case, in particular, maybe they would start treating him like an SRANK. And in the end, that's what happened. Then the Death Knight charges at him with everything, but it's not. For nothing that his name is Instructor Hakes. He makes an Illuminati sign there fiercely and slashes the knight, however. While he was facing the knights, he says that our protagonist is different. And as much as I hate to admit it, you have the talent to be a player, kid. So run away from here, take the others, and run as far away as you can as a supervisor. For you guys here, it's my duty to protect you, however. Our protagonist is frozen, not knowing what to do, because all the others have already died. However, when our protagonist was standing there thinking about what to do, boom, something appeared behind his back. He was destroyed, and in the end, no matter how many beautiful words Instructor Hakes had spoken, his end was the same as the others. Now, I want to see what our protagonist is going to do, son? Because everyone else and the supervisor died. I demand a duel, and clearly, our protagonist doesn't know what to do. Since everyone is dead, what can he do against all these knights, however? There is still a glimmer of hope. He looks down and sees Instructor Hakes' ring. But he doesn't have time to be thinking about whether to grab the ring or not, because the knight is charging at him with everything, son. But of course, our protagonist manages to dodge and grab the ring. And you guys already know what happens from here, right, guys? His eyes gleamed, the aura burst out, and he finally awakened. About damn time. Right, man? The guy went 3 chapters, 2 chapters, or whatever, without using predation, man. And of course, that left the leader of the Death Knights confused. What kind of power is this? And just as all the knights were charging at our protagonist, you have equipped the Sage's Ring. All stats increased by 10. Thus, all conditions were fulfilled, and the seal on predation was removed. Bro, there it is. So, the knights charge at our protagonist with everything, but our protagonist is unconcerned, so to speak. Because now that predation is activated, he is much stronger, right, son? However, the time required for predation to completely devour is approximately 10 seconds. In other words, he can't just rely on predation. So, he activates the stone skin skill to make his sword stronger. Every skill he has collected so far, and all those stats he has been accumulating, Hei's going to have to use them all right now, bro, because that's the only way he will manage to survive. While our protagonist was there, fighting frantically against the knights, a spear is thrown at him, son. It's the leader of the knights, whom from now on, I'll call the Skeleton King. Because, well, whatever for some reason. The Skeleton King is pissed off at our protagonist, so he uses his power to control tons, and tons of spears. And when our protagonist looks, there are multiple spears, heading straight for him, but by a hair. He manages to dodge them one by one. However, if our protagonist keeps going, like this, Hei's going to die, son. His only option to avoid dying is to use predation. On the Skeleton King's son, however, for some reason, predation didn't work on him, bro. You think you are powerful. This is your limit. Kid and boom, he hits our protagonist with everything, guys. Is this where our protagonist is going to die? That's what we are going to find out. Right now, that's a great question. I want to ask you a question. Who bestowed this power upon you? And to test our protagonist, the Skeleton King unleashes an insane aura, but predation is managing to resist all of it. Yes. Exactly as I thought, unlike normal humans. You can understand our language, so tell me, kid, what exactly is this power of yours? Meanwhile, in our protagonist's mental space, he is seeing that monster from the beginning of the story. And as soon as he looks to the side, he sees the bodies of his companions, and out of nowhere, the Skeleton King appears in his mind, saying that nothing is different from before, and that's when he wonders, what exactly is this predation skill? Because as a human, he began to understand the languages of monsters, completely ignorant of all this. He just obtained a power and a chance. And yet nothing changed. Or rather, why did the king give me this power? And out of nowhere, he hears a voice, saying that he has certainly already told him why, and well, right in front of him, the king appears. Son, it's like he said, I was simply moved by your determination and density. You don't need to change, boy, just move forward. Then our protagonist stands up absolutely furious, son, using predation, eliminating half of the knights around him. The Skeleton King finds this interesting, but it's not over yet, son. Wow, our protagonist begins to release all his mana, intending one final effort. Then the Skeleton King charges straight at him with everything, son. However, the Skeleton King gets a bit intrigued, because our protagonist stopped his sword with just one arm. Son, are you curious to know exactly what this power is? Discover it on your own? And boom, after this maximum effort, our protagonist manages to rank up to Brank. Then, our protagonist takes the Skeleton King's sword and charges at him with everything, son, performing a series of attack sequences. On him, however, it wouldn't be that easy to defeat the Skeleton King just like that, so he sends multiple spears and swords towards our protagonist, breaking his sword, but you know how it is, guys. It also wouldn't be that easy to defeat our faithful protagonist, and with just a raise of his hands, he activates the maximum power of predation and unleashes it right at him with everything. And obviously this left the Skeleton King a bit curious. What power is this? This is not a human's power. This is the power of the king. And just like that, boom, he finishes off the Skeleton King and obtains a new skill. Spirit of the Skeleton King has been registered. Meanwhile, outside, that guy with green hair, whose name I forgot, right, is asking, what is the magical reading of this gate? And the girl back there says it's shrank, son. She continues, saying that the evacuation order has already been issued, but the distortion inside the dungeon is causing a delay in the retreat. And because of that, they aren't sure if the support squad will be able to arrive before the dungeon break. And of course, this green-haired guy got curious, because at this rate, everyone is going to die. Looks like there's no other choice, right, son? Hay's going to have to go in there alone, boy. But it looks like he won't need to, because our protagonist came out of the dungeon all by himself, son, and thanks to our protagonist, the dungeon incident came to an end, and the test participants managed to evacuate without any problems. Also, the bodies of the people who went with our protagonist were recovered and returned to the families of the deceased intact, and also the association decided not to reveal who cleared the apocalyptic dungeon. Really, they had to endure the company's retaliation, but if they told the truth, it's obvious that our protagonist would become a target for the villains. So, the chairman asks them what they thought of the boy, and they are referring to Kim Taeyeon. Our protagonist, right? The green-haired man says that guy cleared the Shrank dungeon alone. So, at the very least, he is at the level of an Shrank player, right? But Taeyuk says that his current rank is much lower than that. With the power that our protagonist possesses, it's very difficult to estimate what his rank really is. The chairman gets curious and asks what they mean by that. They say there's a high chance our protagonist is at the national level powerhouse rank, son. Meanwhile, our protagonist seems to be having a certain dream. From what it seems, Hay's in hell, in other words, in the abyss, however. Since our protagonist is curious, how did he even end up in the abyss? However, when he looks to the side, the king is right there, flying in the sky, son. The guy is insane, but simply out of nowhere. All those monsters charge at the king with everything. However, with just a lift of his hands, he goes through all those monsters. Son, what on earth is this? Is he Thomas? And out of nowhere? He turns to our protagonist and says that he will be waiting for him in the depths of the abyss. And after this dream, he wakes up all startled. Right, son? What was that? He finds it quite strange, right? Because if it felt so real, it couldn't have been just a dream. What did the king mean? Bai is waiting the interpretation. Even Shrank monsters are aware of this skill, and for some reason, he can also understand the language of monsters. There's no way around it, right? Every time. Our protagonist tries to go find out what predation is. More and more doubts and questions pile up in his mind. There's no way around it, right, son? It seems our protagonist's only choice is to get stronger and reach where. Stronger than this is a joke. My son, look at the amount of skills the boy has, man. They don't even fit on the screen anymore. And it was also just as our boy thought. He managed to reach Brank. He also managed to get a skill. The Brank Night King spirit. He can subjugate the enemy with his spirit. And with these stats, he can basically consider himself an SL player. Right, son, but the support guy gets a bit curious. Right, Night King spirit. Hay's sure that's the skill? That pressured him with an insane force. Right, son? With this growth rate, it won't take very long until he reaches the national level strength rank. But while our boy was, they're getting lost in his skills. They hear a noise coming from the door, and our boy gets a bit mind-blown, because there she is, and she calls him dear. Oh no, right, guys. She's totally a 10 out of 10. Son, some time. Later in traffic, the butler, the guard, I don't know what this guy is. Man, Hay's totally confused. Just like us right there. But then Yu Chae-young tells him to relax, because our protagonist is her guest. So chill. Boy, then our protagonist asks her what the guild master of the Elite Wanderer Guild wants with him. Oh, it's quite simple, right, son? She was just curious to know who the kid was, who completed the apocalyptic dungeon. And also, she's going to drop him off at home, right? However, do you think our protagonist believes that? he is quite curious? Because she came all the way to get him for such a trivial reason. Stop lying. Tell me another one. She says that our boy is quite sharp in that case. She asks, does he know what happens in the third round? Of the player tests, she says that the third round will be a survival game similar to the first round. However, unlike the first round, the outside spectators can watch the match, and because of that, his powers will be exposed to the public, and for sure, all the guilds will definitely start desiring you, kid. A low rank awakened, like you who completed and shrank mission. Since that's the case, then let me make an offer that you won't be able to refuse. What do you want, kid? Money, fame, Kim Taeyeon? I will give you anything you desire. Whoa. Anything but what if he asks for? Ha! Lustful things that I can't say here. Right, guys? You guys are dirty-minded, man. In other words, she wants our boy to join her guild. The Wanderer Guild, give a little look. At him, our boy gives a little look. At her no thanks. Him good. Sometime later, anyway. Our boy thanks her, because, for the rest of the way. From there, he will just walk. Right? And of course, that leaves Chae-yoon curious, asking why he, especially because he didn't even hear what she had to say. Whatever your salary is, or anything else, she is about to make it happen. Man, is that right? Let's go. So you can stop being stupid, man. Use your brain. At least once. But Taeyeon tells her not to get him wrong, because he doesn't have any specific reason for not accepting Hayes, just saying no, because he really doesn't want to. But while our chairman was leaving, then out of nowhere, she appears behind him asking, what's your deal, kid? You haven't even become a player yet, and you're already refusing one of the 4 major guilds. However, she is going to forgive him, boy, in fact. She liked our protagonist, man. Too bad Hayes the protagonist, because if it were, me there I'd be all over it, son. No hesitation. But before anything could happen, that ugly guy over there tells her to move on, especially since our protagonist isn't on trial, right? And also, he tells our protagonist not to reject her for no reason, and to accept the offer, especially since at any moment he will need to join some guild, as expected of you, Lin's sister. And of course she gets a bit curious, asking how he knows that. Well, I know a lot of things. I also know about the stolen name. And after hearing that, boom, she gets furious with our protagonist. Man, the real name of Guildmaster Yu Chae-yoon is actually Yu Lin-yeon, the chairman of the Yu Sung group. Yu Jin-young, or whatever his name is, raised a child out of wedlock. As an heir, however, when the other daughter was born into the family, her name, Yu Lin-yeon, was stripped away, and she was reduced to an outsider. The fact that she changed her last name when she became a player is something that only a few people should know. So, how dare you talk that nonsense in front of me? Do you want to die, kid? Remember? You're the one who started this just then. Our protagonist activates predation and uses his new skill, Night King's Spirit. And of course, after seeing this, it's obvious that she didn't budge. Our protagonist is completely insane, son, because, as if it wasn't enough, for him to be able to resist the powers of Enshrank, player, he turned it right back on her. Our protagonist walks right up to her, pins her against the wall, and tells them not to cross the line. And she blushed. This boy is powerful, man. He made her look like a dwarf. While in there completely lost, man, a few days later, already at the 3rd test, a guy is saying that he chose a nostalgic ancient Rome theme as the location for the 3rd round of the player licensing examinations, unlike the 1st and 2nd rounds, which were not revealed to the public. The 3rd round will allow an audience, industry people, family members, and all that blah blah blah. Screw it. Who cares about that? Everyone is. They're watching it. And of course, Weakling can't be missing, guys. Of course, she's going to be watching our match, especially after that certain incident, right? Meanwhile, down below, everyone is targeting our protagonist, right, son? Because they all know it was our protagonist who defeated those lightning punks over there. And they probably also know it was our protagonist who cleared the Shrank dungeon, son. And obviously, the other Shranks are also targeting our protagonist, man. Everyone is against our protagonist, man. That's it, and that's how the battle begins. Everyone charges right at him, son. Everyone aims their powers at our protagonist. But that's nothing to our protagonist. He walks right through all their powers. And boom, the first one is already down, son. And with just a single punch, he sends everyone flying into the air. Son, everyone is flying. It's crazy, however. If it were that, easy to defeat all the Shranks like that. Vines sprout from beneath the ground and trap our protagonist. The green-haired guy who trapped our protagonist says that even though he defeated those guys, Shranks can stay on guard, just waiting. Like this in the middle of battle, and if that was your mistake, you had to deal with him. Right, and when the green-haired guy thought he had beaten our protagonist, Taeyeon shatters the ice wings and runs right over the guy. With everything, my son, however, even though our protagonist is stronger than everyone, there he doesn't have infinite mana, right? Since it's like that. It's time to end it. End this right now? Boy, just like that. He activates the skill called Spirit of the Night King, and after he uses this skill, a giant skull appears above our protagonist. And of course, everyone falls before him. And it wasn't just the players in the arena who felt this pressure. Everyone felt it, both the crowd and the instructors felt this pressure. Just like that, our protagonist defeats all of them with the exception of one person. And obviously that's Weakling, guys. So our protagonist asks her what she wants to do. He doesn't care if she forfeits the test now. Or do you want another little kiss like in the first round? And she blushed too. Man, holy crap. Man, this guy's going to build a harem pretty soon, man. But Weakling doesn't give a damn about that, right? She creates that ice dome. Once again, oh my God. These people, when they just don't know how to accept defeat, right? And inside the dome, she tells our protagonist to worry about his own self. Oh my God. She's going to lose again. Because this time, right here, it won't happen again. I'm sure of it. And in the end, you already know what happened, right, guys? They didn't even show the battle. And in the end, she is just falling to the ground, and our boy is just walking away with total swag, boy. However, even so, according to our protagonist, in the end, she was the toughest opponent. Tough boy, but he won, right? So that's what matters. And with that, the player licensing examinations were completed. Boy, and obviously in the end, the top qualifier of this player licensing exam is candidate number 920, Kim Taeyoon. A while later, the boy was called by the chairman to collect his rewards, right? For being the top qualifier in the test, and also to congratulate our protagonist for becoming an Shrank player. Boy, however, that wasn't the only reason. For him to call our protagonist there, he asks our protagonist if he wants to join the Korean Awakened Association. And clearly our protagonist is a bit glitched out. Like, what do you mean, man? Truly right. Ever since our protagonist regressed, a lot of things have changed. Leaving aside that, before regressing, he was unawakened and out of nowhere. Now he's becoming a Shrank player, and he was even the top qualifier among all the other Shrank players. And of course, he also received several other offers from Yuchao Jung and other guilds. And now, even the chairman is asking him to become a part of the association. However, you guys know how our protagonist is, right, guys? He's strictly a solo player, and obviously he rejects it, right, my son? And obviously the chairman is completely left without a clue, right, asking why. However, our protagonist says there's no special reason. He just doesn't want to, right? He just believes that instead of being a member of one of the 4 major guilds or the association. It's much more effective if he works alone, boy. And completely out of nowhere, the chairman went full Joker, man. He never imagined anyone would say. That kind of thing, the chairman finds it interesting. That level of confidence you have, kid? In that case, how about doing something else instead? Of joining the association? And of course, this leaves our protagonist curious, asking what other thing. He asked our protagonist, "Are you interested in participating in the Asian exhibition games? Now I want to see it, my son." Our protagonist is going to steal all of his skills, but I'm a thief, guys. A few days later, our protagonist was clearing a dungeon. As always, right, however, Hayes a bit pensive. Right, especially since the proposal the chairman made to him is pretty interesting, right, my son? The Asian exhibition games? It's an event where players from various Asian countries. It is a festival where the associations and guilds of other Asian countries choose 5 representatives to hunt monsters and compete against each other, however. To be chosen as a national representative, you need to have a record of achievements. That demonstrates which monsters you have hunted, thereby helping the country. But it's easier said than done, son. I want to see you try. Because since our protagonist just recently became a licensed player, right, guys? To reach the level of achievements that others took years to build up, he will obviously have to hunt monsters and clear dungeons that are much stronger, however. Even though he cleared every single dungeon that appeared in South Korea over this past month, he couldn't accumulate any achievements. His mana also didn't grow as much as it should have. There's no other choice, right, guys? Even though it's very dangerous. There is only one place where he will be able to accumulate achievements. But meanwhile, at the mansion of the ugly Junggae's father, the crazy guy was almost sending this man over here to the afterlife, bro, because he failed to send our protagonist to the afterlife. And the reason Hayes so pissed off is because Junjai is still in the hospital, and no one is sending any updates about our protagonist. The heir to our family is still dying in the hospital, while the bastard who did this to him is running around acting like a hotshot shrank. Player, and you want me to calm down? And boom, he throws the bald guy to the floor. Damn, I think Hayes dead. Is there bread in heaven? But while he was punishing the bald guy, a woman arrives in the background, saying that they have a visitor from the malicious guild. And obviously he gets pissed off at those crazy guys. Right, son, because he spent a lot of money on them, and they can't even deal with a single kid. Like that, but he immediately shut his mouth, son, because someone in the background says that he will deal with that boy himself. Hayes going to handle it personally, son. The guy says, I am sorry about your son, but it's better for you to calm down after all. Tizen Group's objective isn't to waste time on a kid like that, right? Who are you to say that? I am the vice master of the malicious guild, known as Shadow. Holy crap, son. Look at this guy's design. That's insane. But meanwhile, our protagonist is stepping out of a gate. And as soon as he exits the gate, there's a chubby guy waiting for him with a sign that says, the newest Shrank player. Wait, who spelled it wrong? Oh my god. Man, my name is Park something or other? It's an honor to meet you. This Park guy is a ranked player hired by an alchemist at the auction house for protection and gate control skills. Then he starts rambling a bunch of things to our protagonist about how his performance was incredible, this and that, blah, 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 and that he became a fan. What an annoying guy. Man, this place where our protagonist is the most prestigious auction district in Asia, called West Point, the point of highest renown and the largest in magnitude in Asia, which has auction items of unparalleled quality, and also features support skills for automatic translation. Among various other features, West Point stands out for several reasons. But what really draws attention and is considered the absolute pinnacle among them, is the issue of security, bro. In other words, you can't just get in. They're without authorization. And that crazy chubby guy wrote our protagonist's name on his forehead, man, according to our protagonist. Indeed, this place deserves the title of the best in security. However, there's one thing that our protagonist knows that they don't know exactly. Right there, in that very location. A terrorist attack is going to happen, or rather, an attack by an Schrank villain, bro. And our protagonist's objective is to stop this attack, however. A while later inside the auction house, a lady was saying that the time has finally come for the item most coveted by everyone in the auction, the Phoenix Potion. Look at what happened to the lady. There, I think she drank a sip of that potion, and her health points instantly increased by 20, but no. And that's what's leaving our protagonist curious, because all he knows from before he regressed is that this place was attacked by an Schrank villain, but because of information cover-ups. He doesn't know exactly what happened, right? And clearly, our protagonist got curious about one thing, right? Who was it that stopped this lunatic man? But while our protagonist was lost in his thoughts, he calls for the chubby guy. They're right, and he asks the chubby guy, who is in charge of security? Around there, obviously, the chubby guy gets a bit curious and asks why he wants to know that. Our protagonist says it's just out of curiosity, nothing. Too much, right? But while he was chatting casually there, out of nowhere, someone approaches and calls out to our protagonist, asking if he is the 12th Schrank player of South Korea, a young Schrank player, Kim Taeon. Is that you? This guy here is Isaka Ryoko, or whatever, man. And Hei's also a Schrank player from Japan. And of course, man, he is the head of security for West Point. According to the chubby guy, there Hei's the type of person you can trust, because Ryoko is whatever, man, just call him Ryoko. He is an SHANH player from Japan, and also largely responsible for the security of the location. In this case, West Point, but he tells our protagonist to be careful with him, because he is called the demon among players. Also known for backstabbing even his own comrades. When it suits him, he walks up to our protagonist and extends his hand to him. And clearly, our protagonist finds it a bit strange, right? The left hand. And as our protagonist shakes his hand back, it transforms into currents running through his body. Clearly, the ugly guy used a power to test him, Ryoko. Gets impressed because he doesn't. Believe our protagonist withstood that shock? Look at him looking at him, right? And clearly, after this, our protagonist was going to get furious with him, right? However, he has a small problem. The civilians are suffering from this pressure. If he tries to face that ugly guy, Ryoko, the civilians will get screwed. So he gets real close to our protagonist and asks if he understands. Now that not every Schrank player is the same, you lunatic, good lord, he tells him Hei's not being very careful at West Point either. He also says he has no idea what brought our protagonist there, but you'd better mind your own business. And with that, he walks away, son. Looks like it won't be as easy as our protagonist thought, son. Meanwhile, at some location inside the auction, a guy is a bit curious. Right, who are these people? But that doesn't matter right now, son. What matters now is how they got in. There, especially since there are only control rooms and gates, how the hell did they get there? In other words, since they went there, they are targets to be eliminated. So, a bald guy says to leave it. To him that hell handle it. Let's go. Hei's going to handle this personally, however, in the next frame. Everyone was taken out, but who are these guys? Who are they to be able to defeat several high-ranking players? And also, who is this skinny guy here? Man, Simple, the malicious guild? And this guy here is Narenta Nero. Obviously, Anne Schrank villain, and also the villain that our protagonist is looking for. right? One of the guys from the guild. There, I don't know his name. I don't even know. He just showed up, man. They all look the same, man. He tells Nero, wait, Nero, my bad. He tells Nero that they arrived late at the auction. The Shrank player from Korea, Kim Taeyeon, is already here. He asks him what they're going to do. And clearly he underestimated our protagonist, asking the guy what he thinks that trash can do, especially since Narenta. Nero is right there at this exact moment. No one will escape divine judgment. While people were there casually at the auction, out of nowhere, boom, multiple explosions occur, start to happen all over the auction house. It clearly leaves our boy curious, because he knew that an attempt would happen. More explosions everywhere. And how on earth did they manage to infiltrate? That's what we are going to find out. Now, because out of nowhere, tons and tons of villains start to appear. And one of them says that if they try to fight back, they'll lose their heads, however. Bam. They were the ones who lost their big heads. And before any more crap happens, right, he tells the chubby guy, to notify the association about this mess that is happening, and of course, ask for reinforcements. Because at this exact moment, he is going after those responsible who caused all this chaos. Meanwhile, at a certain location, we had some guards. They were protecting the auction items. However, it didn't go very well. No. Because in the next frame, everyone bit the dust at once. Then the purple-haired guy says that he finally found the Phoenix potion. In this case, that potion was at the auction, right? Lo and behold. Now he understands why Nero insisted so much on this potion just by looking at it. He feels the tremendous power coming from it. And like every idiot, right, he thinks about drinking the potion, man. However, boom, the wall next to him explodes. And simply, out of nowhere, all of them start falling one by one down. Clearly, the purple-haired guy gets curious, because he knows this skill. This skill is stealth, however. By a stroke of luck, he manages to dodge our opponent's attack. Oh yes, the purple-haired guy uses a chain skill and manages to bind our boy. He asks our protagonist if, just because Hay's invisible, he really thought he could act as he pleased. You're dead, kid. Obviously, our protagonist would be a bit curious. Right. A skill that can track even invisible enemies. Hand that skill. Over here, son, I'm a thief, man, but meanwhile, I thought about a certain location, yes, man, that I'm in the middle of a battle. This crap. Nero summoned tons and tons of monsters, son, and obviously, he took all the people who were at the auction and made them hostages. Nero says that with this, all of them would fear the existence of that god even more, however. While Nero was over there making the preparations, a guy comes up to him and says that they have a problem, and that's when over the radio, our protagonist asks him if he is Narenta. Nero, obviously, Nero gets a bit curious, right? And asks our protagonist who he is, and who else would it be? It's simple. The guy who took your things. If you want them back, you have to come get them, you piece of trash terrorist. And of course, after hearing that, Nero gets furious. With our protagonist, well, sometime. After thrashing the villains, of course our boy chugs the potion. Right down right. And obviously, we have our protagonist impressed, right? Because just from drinking a little bit of this potion, his stats increased a lot. And also, if he continues drinking it, he doesn't need to worry about the Phoenix potion falling into the wrong hands, however, while our boy was over there chilled out, chugging the potion down. Some people arrive right on time, and of course, it's that ugly guy Ryoko, right? And they were a bit confused. Right, because there is no one there, whereas that brown-haired ugly guy, our protagonist, was right there seconds ago. So where is he? But it's like that, right, guys? It wouldn't be that easy to hide from Hay. What are you guys talking about? Hay's right in front of us, so he tells our protagonist to stop hiding and show himself already. Our protagonist finds this a bit strange. Right, because his stealth and invisibility Right, we're supposed to be foolproof. How did this ugly guy notice? Man, so... He asks our protagonist what a licensed player like him is doing. There, however, our boy retorts back at him, right, asking if he isn't. The head of security shouldn't. You'll be running around trying to stop the terrorists, however. That ugly guy Ryoko, says Hayes after a special item. Obviously the Phoenix Potion. Right? And clearly after that, our boy. Right. And clearly after that, our protagonist. Heard him saying this just now. He is absolutely sure now, because right from the beginning, there was something strange, especially since it would be impossible for two villains to infiltrate this place and blow everything up without any help. Right. In other words, Isaka Ryoko is a traitor, so he tells our protagonist that he had warned him to mind his own business. Then he charges right at our protagonist with everything. But that's nothing to our protagonist's son. He manages to defend against it easily. Then he tells our protagonist to hand over the Phoenix Elixir. But do you guys really think our protagonist would just hand it over so easily, son? I doubt it, if you think you're such a big villain. Why don't you try to take it by force? And of course, after those words, an insane battle begins between the two. The extras are all completely impressed because, even though they are right there, watching it with their own eyes, they can't believe what they are seeing, so this is a battle between two shranks. Meanwhile, the king is having some difficulty trying to defend against the attacks, but that's not what's making our protagonist curious, because according to our protagonist, the way he attacks is different from his own. He can only track it through vision and intuition. This guy can actually see, so he goes past our protagonist and slash. Ah, right, he hit our protagonist directly, son, and yes, guys. He has the same ability as our protagonist. Invisibility, or rather stealth, however. Our protagonist is not. Going to give up that easily, right, guys? He leaps back away from everyone, using the skills of the knight whose name I forgot, and by the time our protagonist arrived, he had defeated all of them. He hears a voice saying that he made a good decision, however. If you wanted to find me this badly, you should have protected your head too. Hayes charging straight at our protagonist with everything. Son. Meanwhile, on the lower floor, there were two thugs just chilling there. Until boom, our protagonist and Isaka Ryoko crash right through. Son. When Isaka Ryoko thought he had one against our protagonist, that's when he realized that the one in trouble right now is actually him. In the end, it's you who is the fool. And of course, after seeing this, Isaka Ryoko tries to run away, however. Where do you think you're going? He pulls Isaka Ryoko back with everything and bam, take that. You pathetic clown, son. In the end, our protagonist managed to defeat everyone, son of a gun. Our protagonist asks Isaka Ryoko, why did Anne Shrank like him? Become a criminal just for money? And of course, he gets all worked up. So our protagonist shuts him up with a massive kick and sends him flying, son, according to our protagonist. By now, the military forces of each country should already be arriving. However, for some reason, Isaka Ryoko begins to laugh. He says that our protagonist is really naive and doesn't know anything. Meanwhile, at the Awakened Association, someone is running toward the chairman's office, and this old man here asks, how are the reinforcements for West Point coming along? This old man here is the guild master of the Alchemist Guild. Well, you guys already know, right? One of the 4 major Shrank guilds, and the old man's name is Park Sung-woo or something like that. But honestly, I'm just going to call him the old man, according to the chairman. Park Sung-woo, that green-haired man. You know, according to the chairman, he is leading an elite team to go after the terrorists. However, the old man gets furious with them, asking why they haven't set off. Yet I want to know too, old man, however. The chairman is distressed because according to him, there is no Way to get. Over there, the old man reacted just like us. Like, what do you mean, son? Taiyuk says that the terrorists took over the control zone. Of the gates, the old man gets furious. The gates. The old man is going crazy, man. But Taiyuk tells them not to despair, because they have 2 shranks on site. Well, only one, because the other is on the enemy's side, son of a bitch. And on the terrorist side, there's only Narenta Nero. What a ugliest name. Turn back. Until they establish the portal. The 2 of them can handle the job. Actually, just our great protagonist, right? According to them, they might have pinned Nero to the ground, but someone at the door says that if that really happens, he would be, who is this ordinary person? And of course, it's her, guys. Oh my God. It's Yu Chowing. Whoa. I almost said her name wrong. Man, she's so beautiful that I've ever met, man. Look, I'm even stuttering, man. What is this? My psychological state was shaken by an image. Man, are you going crazy? I didn't get this ending. I didn't understand a thing. Anyway, returning to our protagonist. Isaka Ryoko was asking our protagonist if he had ever heard of the demonic contract skill. And then look at that. He gets a load of information. And of course, our protagonist gets a bit curious about that, right? Isaka Ryoko says that the skill is the most terrible one of Narenta Nero. Or let's just call him Nero. Right, brother? And of this damn crazy guy, according to him. He sacrifices offerings, and it depends on their quantity and quality. Depending on the quality, he can summon demons of equivalent levels. And after hearing that, our protagonist got even more curious, man. And of course, he was talking about these people who were there in the thing. I forgot the name of the place, man. Look, what a mess. I'm getting Alzheimer's. Man, practically. Hayes talking about the people who were there at the auction. I remembered the name of the thing. Of course, the more people he sacrifices. Clearly, the chairman was terrified by this. Among all the shranks, Nero is famous for being one of the most powerful, according to the old man, if he really sacrifices hundreds of people and summons demons, it will definitely be a complete disaster. Returning to our protagonist, Hayes pressing Isaka Ryoko against the wall, right to find out more about this guy, and simply out of nowhere, Isaka Ryoko goes full Joker and says that our protagonist has been lucky so far. But against Nero, our protagonist doesn't stand a ghost of a chance. This has already happened with Isaka Ryoko. Right, go on, kid, decide. Are you going to beg for your life on your knees? Or are you going to watch innocent hostages being sacrificed? Or are you going to face the crazy guy, with no chance of winning and die like a dog? Meanwhile, at Nero's ritual, the ugly guy in the mask tells Nero that the ugly Isaka Ryoko was defeated by our protagonist. He asks Nero what they should do from now on. And according to Nero, he says it would be impossible for our protagonist to defeat him hidden, so he must probably be waiting for backup from the association. He got it right. In other words, whatever happens, if he doesn't show up, we need to drag him out. Let the festival begin in the name of the gods, huh? But before he could try to finish off a woman, out of nowhere the lights went out. And of course, that left the security guard completely helpless, right? And as soon as Nero blinked, all the bosses had already vanished. My son, almost all of them, right? And when Nero least expected it, our protagonist seemed to want to use his chain skill. However, Nero wasn't caught that easily. Right, guys? Being very alert, he manages to dodge the chains coming out from stealth. From our protagonist, and using multiple snakes, he fires wave after wave of fireballs at our protagonist, and boom. But that's nothing to our protagonist, right, guys? He managed to dodge just in time before the fireballs could reach him, and as soon as the hostages see our protagonist, they start shouting to save them, this and that and blah blah blah, our protagonist just grabs everyone, throws them into the portal, and that's it. Well, now that the hostages are safe, our protagonist needs to face a legion of monsters. You son of a gun, so... The monsters charge right at our protagonist with everything, however. Our protagonist slices all of them in a second, my son. And using the knight's skill, no way in hell do I remember the name of this skill. He tries to suppress the monsters, however. For some reason, it didn't work for God's sake, and clearly our protagonist became a bit curious as to why the skill didn't work, but it's no time for him to be overthinking this, son, because the monsters are charging at him with everything and, bam, the monster hits him dead. According to Narenta Nero, this skill of our protagonist will never work because these two creatures, the monsters that our protagonist is facing, are creatures bound by a demonic contract, meaning they are entirely different creatures from the normal monsters he knows. Thanks to this so-called deal with the devil, Nero has total control over these monsters. And not only that, they are also stronger and more durable than normal monsters. In other words, our protagonist took a heavy blow, kid. Just because you defeated Isaka Ryoko, you shouldn't think you can challenge the gods. And clearly, the hostages are all scared out of their minds, right, son? Because Nero is managing to pressure our opponent, who is in Shrank player. And this woman over here tells them to pay attention. Because of our protagonist, the monsters aren't even looking at them. And even while pressured by multiple monsters, he didn't let a single one of them get near them. In other words, from the very start. Our protagonist was trying to save everyone. That is what they are thinking. Son, in my view, our protagonist just wants to steal their skills. I am a thief, man. And to try and encourage our protagonist, they all start shouting that they are on his side. Shut your mouths and stop annoying me. Our protagonist is pissed off because the hostages are only getting in his way. And these monsters also seem never-ending, right? And clearly, they get thrown off by our protagonist's attitude, and Nero bursts into laughter. Then let's finish this quickly. Player Park, do it. The fat guy is the key. And that's when Nero realized that this was a setup. From the very beginning, son, the chubby guy starts reciting a bunch of incantations that I don't understand a damn thing of. Can you guys understand this? It looks like Arabic. What kind of seal is this, man? Well, sometime before, our protagonist raided the place and started beating everyone up. He was talking to the chubby guy about everything that happened there, saying that the ugly Isaka Ryoko was on the villain's side, and this and that, blah blah blah, nobody cares about. That, everyone wants to know about the battle. Right, so our protagonist explains to the chubby guy that the control room is probably infested with monsters. If our protagonist only had to face the monsters, it wouldn't be a problem, right? However, there are also those dead-weight hostages. So the chubby guy gets desperate, asking our protagonist what they are going to do, and that's when our protagonist had an idea. They need the chubby guy's skill. In other words, his gate manipulation skill. But differently. From how the chubby guy was thinking of using his skill to save the hostages first, our protagonist's plan is different, cutting back to the battle. Our protagonist's plan is actually quite simple. Instead of saving the hostages first, he asked the chubby guy to send the monsters to the middle of nowhere. And clearly, Nero gets furious with our protagonist, because without his monsters, he is totally screwed. Now that the monsters have been sent far away, our protagonist tells the chubby guy that his role there is over, meaning he should take the hostages and get the hell out. And of course, the chubby guy objects, saying he'd want leave our protagonist behind, but no. It's not like the chubby guy could face and shrank villain, right? Especially since from now on, this is where the real battle begins. Bring it on, boy. And of course, after seeing this, the chubby guy calls everyone and runs for it now. Man, since there's nobody left To get in our protagonist's way, it's time for the battle. To begin, then Nero goes straight at our protagonist with everything, launching fireballs after fireballs. Straight at him, however, our protagonist manages to dodge masterfully. Then our protagonist fights back by sending his chains straight at Nero, but he manages to defend himself. Using the rocks that were floating around the area, then he asks him a little question. If he really thinks Hay's the only one that matters, do you really think a brat like you could defeat me? With that, he creates a flame dragon. And man, it swept right over our protagonist with everything. And boom, it hits our protagonist hidden, guys. It doesn't matter how many monsters you kill, boy, or how many hostages you save if you can't defeat me all. Your effort will be in vain. However, he can't give up there. If he gives up, right there, the chaos that will spread across. This entire place will be massive, boy. You will have to die, he unleashes the monsters. Straight at our protagonist with everything all over again. Stop screaming, you idiot. The one who's going to die here is going to be you with a raise of his arms. He activates the full power of predation and unleashes it. Straight at Nero with everything, son. And clearly Nero is impressed. Wow, because all this time, this boy was hiding all this power. And of course, after seeing all this power from our protagonist, Nero gets happy. So you're the one, aren't you the perfect sacrifice, just like our protagonist who had an ace up his sleeve. Nero has his too, right, son? Simply out of nowhere, Nero begins to drain the life of all his subordinates. In this way, all sacrifices have been offered. Oh, my lord, bring forth the divine punishment against the pagans. With that, a dragon, a green, shrank bone dragon, appears behind Nero. Meanwhile, the fat guy and the hostages were cornered, however. Out of nowhere, all the villains begin to laugh, and a massive tremor happens, and you guys already know what's going on, right, guys? When the fat guy went outside, our protagonist and Nero are flying through the sky. And clearly, our protagonist is taking a beating, but man, there's no comparison, right, man? A freaking dragon against a human. And to avoid getting wiped out, our protagonist uses his chains on a building and crashes through the wall. Our protagonist is getting a bit curious. Like, man, where did this monster come from? However, he doesn't have time to think about that, because the dragon is already right in front of him, son. And just like that, our protagonist is attacked from all directions. He even tries to use predation to stop the dragon, but for some reason, predation isn't working. Who would have thought, right, guys? That there would be a monster capable of countering predation. I misspoke. Ah, yes, the dragon prepares a fireball and unleashes it straight at our protagonist with everything, and boom, they hit him hidden, guys. Or did they? Our protagonist managed to dodge the fire, man. Nero is impressed, because he didn't think our protagonist would survive an attack like that. And now, guys, what is our protagonist going to do? Because my predation isn't working, how on earth is he going to manage to defeat this guy? I don't know either, guys, but we are going to find out right now. But of course, unleashing all this power must also have a consequence, right? Which means he is also reaching his limit. Our protagonist manages to persist a bit longer, but the clash of speed didn't work out. So you must be thinking of buying time, huh? You're not a bad assassin, boy, but know that your petty tricks won't work against me. Look, he goes all out against our protagonist, and he hit our protagonist. Hidden, at least that's what I think, because meanwhile, at the Awakened Association, they managed to restore the gates. However, according to the lady, there South Korea is the only country. According to her own information, for a player like him, she thinks, it would be way too dangerous for him to enter there right now. But he doesn't give a damn about that. And since that's the case, as for the boy who is in danger at this exact moment, let's enter through the eastern point now and rescue our comrades. Returning to the battle, everyone was doing okay, because our protagonist arrived right on time. To save everyone, however, Nero had already anticipated that our protagonist would make that choice. In that case, boy, turn into my ashes, and seeing that, the chubby guy despairs and tells our protagonist not to worry about them. What's the use of you dying to save us? And the chubby guy is actually right, guys. Since our protagonist can't defeat him in a direct confrontation, the only way to defeat Nero is by making him reach his limit even. So, I still can't give up. So our hero starts thinking about how he can save everyone. Think. And out of nowhere, a voice in the background asks if he can't bear to watch this anymore. And of course, he looks back startled, however. When he checks, only the chubby guy is there, obviously. He gets completely confused, like, what voice was that? And out of nowhere, the rank of predation starts to be temporarily adjusted. In other words, guys, the rank of predation is now rank a buddy. However, it didn't stop there. Predation starts spiraling out of control. It rose through the ranks uncontrollably. Before it was rank A. Now it's rank S. And then it went to rank SS. And to top it off, rank SSS son. Nero is completely shocked. Like, what kind of power is this, however? As I said before, guys, predation started spiraling out of control. In other words, our protagonist's body is being destroyed, son. And obviously he gets furious. Because is he really going to die this way, such a meaningless death like this? And even after everything he did, to get all the way here, no matter the cost. No matter the cost, I cannot die here, however. He falls to the ground unconscious. Guys, however, even while unconscious, he is emanating an extremely powerful energy. Nero cannot understand it. He thought he was the pinnacle of controlling his own skill. But what kind of ridiculous amount of skill? Is this what Nero fails to understand? Is that our protagonist couldn't handle the power of the skill and fainted, but why on earth did the skill not stop? And using his monster's help, he prepares an attack and launches it at our protagonist with everything. However, his attack is repelled because our protagonist stood back up. And when Nero looks up, there are tons and tons of giant bats watching him, the perfect god. What a joke. Nero is completely left without understanding a thing. Who are you? You are not. Kim Tae-yoon. Silence, worm, do not speak. My name, you damn insect, after all. You are already dead, with just a lift of his arms. He completely obliterates Nero, and a new skill has been registered. Demonic contract. Meanwhile, our boy is in a totally dark place, and he gets a bit curious. Like, where on earth is he? But out of nowhere, multiple chains bind his body, and tons of rocks are hurled at him. And the paralysis skill is used on his body. In other words, his very own skills are being used against him. And out of nowhere, the Skeleton King appears right in front of him. Our protagonist asks him why he is using his skills. Who said this power was going to be free? Now you will pay the price. And just when the big monster was coming with everything, at our protagonist, he falls out of bed and wakes up. And as soon as he looks at his arms, he gets a bit curious, because there isn't a single wound, and out of nowhere, Go Taewook arrives. They're saying that he finally woke up sometime. Later, they went to grab some food, right? And Taewook explains to him that this house they are staying in, their right was prepared by his association, and by the alchemists for our own. It was basically like a thank you, right? For him having helped with the terrorist case over there, and because of our protagonist, they managed to arrest that ugly guy, Isaka Ryoko, as well, who fell into the villain's traps, and also a lot of people survived considering the scale of the attack. And according to Sungwoo, a lot of people who care about our protagonist already went to visit him, from his family to the association chairman. Man, look, Sungwoo tells him not to worry, because according to the medical exams, he is healthy. Sungwoo says that he only stayed there to protect our protagonist, in case some villain tried to attack him, right? However, this is making our protagonist curious, right? Hei's sure that he lost consciousness while fighting Narenta Nero. So, what on earth happened there, however? We don't know. What really happened there, going back a few days? Earlier to our protagonist's battle against Narenta Nero, the fat guy obviously saw everything, right? With just one attack. Our protagonist defeated Narenta Nero. However, one thing made the fat guy curious, because while this appearance really belongs to Kim Tae-eun, this person is not him, and in despair, the fat guy screams asking what he did to Kim Tae-eun. Blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, the fat guy was terrified. Look, guys, the being who is possessing our protagonist's body turns around furious at him. Look, and unable to withstand the pressure of the power of this being who is in our opponent's body. Well, the fat guy passes out, damn it. I've already reached my limit anyway. I can't do anything for now. I will withdraw. With that, the transformation undoes itself, and our protagonist returns to normal, guys. And it was at that exact moment that Sungwoo arrived, right, and saw everyone passed out. Clearly, this must make our protagonist even more curious. Like, what do you mean, man? According to Sungwoo. He even asked the others when they woke up. But the only thing they remember is our protagonist trying to defeat Narenta Nero. It's as if something had messed with their minds. It was probably that crazy guy who was in our protagonist's body. Right, man? I'm sure. I'm right, man? It was probably him who did that to the fat guy. And to the others, right? And since Sungwoo doesn't know, he keeps thinking it was the villain's doing. And after explaining everything to our protagonist, he takes off, however. Our protagonist is sure it wasn't Narenta Nero's doing, or the other villain's doing, especially since there would be no way his arm would regenerate on its own. And probably that power-up was something from predation. But when he opens his status window, he sees that he gained a new skill, right? Brank, demonic contract. This skill allows him to reverse the gate to the abyss and the required mana. For him to activate this skill is 200. And clearly he was a bit confused, right? Open the gate? Wait, wasn't it a skill? To summon monsters. This skill? Am I going crazy, man? However, to break our protagonist's concentration, Sungwoo arrives again, saying that he has another visitor. And as soon as our protagonist looks, it's Yulin, guys. She came to pay a little visit to our protagonist. Don't you get it, man? She arrives all furious, tossing a fruit basket on top of the food, going crazy. She tells our protagonist that she had heard our protagonist got hurt, but apparently Hei's completely fine, right? And not only that, she also heard that he saved a bunch of people. In the terrorist attack, yes. And on top of that, face to shrinks. So, don't go. Bragging about it, it won't take me long. To catch up to you, what a crazy life, man. According to her, it won't take long to catch up to our brother. Right, so he asks her what she came to do. There, she says she came to visit someone who was hurt. I think it's better to call the police, right? She says that at first. She had been worried when she found out our protagonist got hurt. But apparently, he is doing well, right? And what kind of absurd energy is this? According to her, he is stronger than that time during the player examinations. And she blushed, remembering that man, however. While they were distracted, they start to hear the sound of footsteps, and our protagonist gets pissed off. Right, because people just don't stop showing up, man. Someone is arriving all the time. And when they look, there she is, guys. Now we're talking, son. She knows the door code. Serious question. Now, guys, who do you prefer, Yulin? Or Yu Chaeyoung personally? I prefer Yu Chaeyoung, man. 1,000 times Yu Chashong, but anyway. Everyone has their own preferences. Yulin gets furious, asking what her sister is doing. They're at Taeyeon's house? Oh, girl. You have no idea, and not Only that, right? How does she know the code to Taeyeon's house? Well, that's easy, man. The woman is a guild master, for crying out loud. Obviously, it was the association that gave it to her, right? In noticing the situation. Out of nowhere, she hugs our protagonist from behind. Whoa. And of course, Yulin gets completely flustered, right? Asking what her sister is doing, so Yu Cha-young asks, what's the problem? Two high-ranking players sharing the same house. What kind of relationship could they have? Damn, Yulin gets furious, saying that this is a crime, that she is a minor, and blah. Blah, blah, blah. A minor? Where, man? The guy is 19 years old, however. To cut off the petty argument that was developing between the sisters, our protagonist slaps Yu Chae-young's hand away. What is this, son? You don't like it, man? Are you crazy? Our protagonist tells her to stop with the nonsense. What does she want? This time, if she came all this way just to invite him to join her guild again. He already said he doesn't want to. She says that's not it. Today, she just came to visit him, really. And this time, she even brought a gift for our protagonist. See? I told you, she's trying to win him over. She knows how to ask for what she wants. Whatever. The head of the association, in this case, the chairman, right, told Yu Cha-young that our protagonist has his eyes on. The Asian exhibition games, however, even with everything our protagonist did at West Point, during the fight against Nero there, he is still only in 30th place in terms of merit points for Taeyeon. To manage to reach the top 5 and represent them, he will need a master-level party, and that's why Yu Cha-young is there. She hands Kim Taeyeon an entry pass to the Temple of Fire, which means a double dungeon boy. But meanwhile, some people were observing West Point, that stylish guy with the mask whose name I forgot. Honestly, I don't even care. He asks where Nero is. One of the henchmen says that they still haven't been able to confirm it. He asks if he should inform the boss about this. But the masked man says there's no need, because they already got what they wanted anyway, since that miserable guy was nothing more than a mercenary Nero. However, while they were casually talking, out of nowhere, a giant ship arrives. They're saying that they are surrounded. Only agents from the Special Investigation Unit have access to that location. Drop your weapons on the ground and surrender now, however, in the blink of an eye. They were already inside the ship. As I was saying, Kim Taeyeon. Now there's someone who has sparked my interest. Holy crap, son. This guy is strong as hell. The miserable bastard. But anyway, right, a few days later, at the headquarters of the Wanderer Guild, I think that's how you pronounce it right, but anyway, everyone is happy, right? Because our protagonist is there on a mission, together with Yu Chae-young, and wait, I almost said Yulin, but okay, with Yu Chae-young, even though our protagonist has an entry pass to the gate. The item distribution and team formation are handled by them, right? But this is something our protagonist didn't expect. Our protagonist keeps thinking, what kind of gift could this be? He kept wondering what kind of gift it would be. And it actually turned out to be a pass to the Temple of Fire. The Temple of Fire, named as such because the entrance appears to be in flames. It is also the second most lethal dungeon in the country. After our protagonist's regression, Yu Chae-young's guild managed to conquer it, however. They suffered devastating damage, even considering the risk of this dungeon. Massive growth and achievement points are guaranteed, right? But there is one thing our protagonist is curious about. He doesn't know if it's because of what happened to him in the last battle, but his strength and stamina dropped significantly. Man, he thought it would be too much of a burden for him to face this place. But with Yu Cha-young, who is Anne Shrank, and all these people, it will be easy, right? But in the next frame, the only people who are going to enter the double dungeon will be our protagonist and Yu Cha-young. He's going to ask Yu Cha-young why only the two of them are going into the dungeon. Isn't it obvious? This is our date. Well, anyway, so They finally enter the dungeon, and as soon as they enter, he is impressed by a giant hole in the middle of the dungeon. Son, then Yu Cha-young said that this is incredible. The vibe of this dungeon is completely different from all the others she has ever entered. He wonders a bit. If all double dungeons are like this, according to our protagonist, at least the apocalyptic dungeon he entered before was exactly like this. The layout wasn't that different either, so she gets very close to the edge and asks how they are going to get down. There, our protagonist tells her to be careful, because it's probably a monster trap. And right as our protagonist says that, a monster pulls her down. Son. Our protagonist grabbed her hand and dove down. Son. However, as soon as he lands, there Yu Cha-young had already finished off the monster. With one attack, son, man, she's extremely strong. See how simple it is? We just had to jump. Hey guys, I know what you like, a crazy, hot, and beautiful girl, man, but it didn't end there, guys. Because I don't know if you noticed, but they are still falling. And right below them are tons and tons of monsters, man. However, do you really think Yu Cha-young will give the monsters time to do anything? Of course not, son. She prepares an attack and bam, she sweeps through, slicing all the monsters, son, and it's not over yet, son. She strikes back against the wall, destroying the remaining ones as well. Wow, our protagonist is impressed by her because these monsters are all rank monsters, and she wiped them all out in a single blow. Right, come on, protagonist, don't play around. Man with a sight like that, you definitely have to be impressed. Dude, our protagonist gets a bit curious. Like, had she been hiding her powers? He knows she is a strong shrank, but he didn't think she was this strong. Now, he understands why she suggested they enter here alone. Actually, she wants to help you, since that's the case. Our protagonist is also going to take this seriously, and after a while of killing tons and tons of monsters, they finally reach the end. And as always, our protagonist is impressed by her, because the number of monsters was immense, son. But none of them gave her enough trouble. But before they head to the boss room, relax. It's not like a celebration is breaking out, because she has another gift for him, right? So she hands him the Ring of the Sage Warrior. The Ring of the Sage Warrior, a unique rad ring that rapidly increases your strength and stamina. Our protagonist says that this is more than enough for him to restore his stats that had dropped, but Yu Cha-young says that she's just being fair by giving these offensive stats to our protagonist. Her guild also benefits from this, right? So it's all good, right? She asks if our protagonist liked it, because he can have a lot more if he joins her guild. But if that's the case, why are you only giving me this now, you crazy girl? Damn it, would have been better if she had given him the ring. Damn, it would be better if she had given a ring for him before he enters the dungeon, right? No? Wait, or he puts it on his finger. She asked if he thinks she's a psychopath, but he says he prefers the word pragmatic. He tells her that from here on out, they really need to be careful, because it seems there is an entity opposing them, the master of this place. Wait, man, the master is an egg? What? That's the thing, guys. You have to be a real man to sit on the egg. You have to be a real man to sit on the egg, you know. That's the vibe. The problem with this, guys, is that it's not just an egg, my son, because the rank of this thing, it doesn't even have a rank. This piece of crap, man. Our protagonist says he doesn't know what kind of monster it is, but Hayes, sure, it's the boss of this dungeon. So he was about to say something to Chowing about gathering information, right? But before he could, my son, Cha-young was already charging straight at the boss with everything. Man, get ready, and boom, she completely destroys the egg, my son. So we can head down there and ask if she's okay. If I'm okay, I destroyed everything. She's crazy, man, but it wouldn't be that easy, right, guys? She shattered a bunch of stuff, and out of nowhere, A light begins to emanate from the broken egg. The two of them are left completely clueless, because if she didn't, destroy the egg. Unpredictable humans. Who would have thought you would crawl all the way to my temple? I see we have some interesting guests here. But even that power you were bragging about is nothing compared to my blue fire. Yes, guys, the master of the Temple of Fire. Of the double dungeon is a phoenix, the phoenix. A monster with immense regenerative abilities and also magic resistance, which could make one mistake it for an immortal being. In other words, our protagonist is completely screwed. The problem, guys, isn't even that it's a phoenix. It's that it's a blue fire phoenix. There's a legend about it, saying that this monster can control your mind, man. However, it was already too late, my son. She goes full throttle against our protagonist with everything obviously being controlled by the phoenix. This is pretty ridiculous, right, guys? How can a veteran like her fall for a cheap trick like that, man? But anyway, my son, that doesn't matter right now. What matters is how our protagonist is going to manage to stop her. She launches wave after wave of attacks at our protagonist. However, our protagonist manages to dodge them easily, and in an attempt to stop Chae-young, he activates the Skeleton King's skill, pinning her to the ground. He even tries to yell at her, telling her to snap back to normal, but she doesn't give a damn about that, my son. She gets back up, furious at our protagonist. She uses a green sphere in her hand and launches it, blasting our protagonist with everything and pum. Haha, as always, humans are foolish creatures, however. Just when the phoenix thought it had won, her leg was caught by our protagonist's chains. But not just her legs. Her entire body was bound by the chains. And as you guys also know, these chains have a paralysis effect. In other words, she can't move, boy. It seems that now our protagonist knows who it was that annihilated the squad. The one responsible for annihilating the squad from the Wanderer Guild. Before our protagonist regressed, guess what, guys? Right there. He readies his strike and boom, hits her dead, man. This guy isn't afraid of getting arrested, my son. That's the second time, boy, that he hits this fine woman, man. He only hit her, obviously, guys, to break her out of the Phoenix's control. As soon as she wakes up, she'll return to normal. At least that's what our protagonist hopes, right? But the problem now is how Hei's going to manage to defeat the Phoenix. Did you like the little game I prepared, boy? Playing around with humans, you look like a chicken. Our protagonist threw her onto his back, like a sack of potatoes, and started running, of course. Hei's going to run, man. If he stays standing there, but it wouldn't be that easy to escape a blue phoenix, right, my son? It prepares an attack. And boom, blasts our protagonist with everything. What are you doing, man? Come on, show me. What can you possibly do then? Our protagonist went full Kratos, guys, putting chains on his dagger and throwing them right up at the Phoenix with everything. Holy crap, the guy became Kratos, man. However, you forgot one thing, boy. I am the very embodiment of fire, and in Kratos style, he unleashes wave after wave of slashes right at it, hoping to deal some damage, slicing me endlessly. Like this will only fuel my flames even more, just like that. They blow up all the chains on our protagonists. In the end, a mere human, like you would never defeat me. And just like that, it looks like it's evolving like a Pac-Man, so it charges up with everything and but obviously, our protagonist managed to dodge it easily. However, there's one thing making our protagonist curious. How did it get so massive? A phoenix with gigantification? According to our protagonist, maybe this phoenix is a superior phoenix, superior monsters, mutant organisms that possess powers far beyond the standard monster class. To distinguish them from other monsters, this so-called superior title is added to their baseline rank. In other words, guys, if this phoenix really is a superior phoenix, our protagonist has 0 chance of beating it using only his basic skills. The only way for him to fight against it would be by using predation. But we have a problem, right? What if it loses control? Just like last time. Truly, right, guys? That's the reality. Our protagonists can't win against the Phoenix without predation. But of course, Hei's afraid, right, guys? But right in the middle of this, should I use predation or not dilemma? She finally wakes up, asking our boy a question. Why am I tied up then? He has to explain to her that she was being controlled by the Phoenix. This and that, blah, 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 but they don't have time. For this, my son? Right in the middle of their little squabble, boom, the Phoenix hits him deaden. How dare you get distracted with me right in front of you? But no. Our protagonist doesn't give a damn about that, and they charge forward, tearing into the Phoenix. Make sure you don't fall under its control again. You worry. Too much, kid, I won't fall for that again. How dare you are. Nothing but foolish insects, have you still not realized that your attacks are utterly useless? So, she activates the Monarch's heart skill and says she'll take the lead, but not this time, my son. This time, the one taking the lead is me, just like that. She pulls out a terrifying spear and slash. Hits the Phoenix deaden, the one who will end this. Is me, Shrank Amazon Spirit, in berserk mode? Holy crap, what a terrifying transformation. Right after entering berserk mode, she goes all out against the Phoenix. My son, berserk mode. A mode that unleashes a reverse flow of mana into all skills. And since this skill can cause severe damage to the body, most people are afraid to use it, but what if you could control that power? For a brief moment, the raw strength that this power can provide to the person controlling it is transcendental and slash. She slices through the Phoenix with everything using the spear. Boy! However, it didn't stop there. She appears behind the Phoenix with incredible speed, striking it from multiple different directions, and in an attempt to put an end to all of this quickly, she uses a green sphere, and boom, our girl is going insane. My son, look at that, however. Clearly, sooner or later, she was going to reach her limit, right? And that's exactly what happened after dealing with the Phoenix, my son. She passed out, and seeing this, the Phoenix gets absolutely furious, my son. How dare mere foolish humans reduce me to this pathetic state? I will slaughter you all. However, clearly, our protagonist won't let that happen, right, guys? So he uses his chain skill, binding it from behind. However, there's one thing leaving our protagonist a bit curious, because to stop the Phoenix's regeneration ability, I must use a destructive power that completely overwhelms that skill. Our protagonist really can't afford to lower his guard, but his pride was wounded. But the one who will deliver the final blow will be me a while later. Outside the Phoenix Gate, Yu Chae-young's subordinates were a bit curious and asking if Yu Chae-yoon and our protagonists are doing well, right? However, the guy in front tells them not to worry, since those two are absolute monsters. Yeah, there's nothing to worry about. But the only problem, according to them, there is that when Yu Chae-young starts coming back, she turns into a complete lunatic. Right? Seriously, she becomes a psychopath. However, while the guys were talking, they're about everything that was happening. In the gate, our protagonist came out of the gate, carrying Yu Chae-hoon in his arms, son. The Temple of Fire was cleared. A few days later, the rumors that our protagonist and Yu Chae-young were dating exploded, right? And after reading the comments, she gets all blushed, boy. But clearly, she gets furious with the rumors about her, like if everything was done in secrecy, why is it all over the internet? Man, then her subordinate says that clearing a double dungeon is a major topic. Right, with this kind of thing. Secrecy is hard. The other guy says he only told this to a few close friends. The last one says that it's not fair. He did all this for the guildmaster. Blah, 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 blah. looking at Yu Chae-young's face. I can only say one thing, guys. They are completely screwed, right? While Yu Chae-young was throttling her subordinate, the chairman arrives there, calling for her, but he gets a bit stunned by the scene that is happening. There, right? Then they sort everything out. And after everything, you can see, Hei's a bit relieved, right? Because she is doing well. Boy, a while later, the chairman is a bit curious, right? Because what are the skills that you wanted to verify from Kim Tae-yeon? She says she didn't see them. Since when she fainted, it was our protagonist who finished off the phoenix. Right, and even though 2 days have passed since the Temple of Fire collapsed, right, according to what Yu Chung said our protagonist told her, he was heading into the depths of the abyss, which clearly leaves her even more curious about how strong this boy wants to become. Obviously, after hearing that, the chairman gets a bit excited, right? Because this is definitely a tremendous evolution, he asks Yu Chae-yoon if this isn't good for the new South Korea. Then Yu Chae-yoon gets a bit curious and says that, in reality, she can't understand the reason for this. Obviously, everyone desires to get stronger, but after achieving a certain success, it's natural that you stay satisfied and rest, right? However, our protagonist, the king, doesn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Instead of that, he keeps trying to evolve, doing whatever it takes to become stronger. Then, she asks the chairman why he thinks the boy has such an immense desire to become stronger. For a moment, he remains silent, but he says he thinks he understands the boy. According to the chairman, this is patriotism. Is he going crazy? It's an era full of monsters and rogue awakened hunters, out of control, of course, for the country to overcome these times. With prosperity, then, what drives our protagonist with such an intense desire is actually quite simple. It's a strong desire to help. Look, my friend, I don't think that's it at all. Hei's going crazy. Meanwhile, in the depths of the abyss, for some reason, there are several people who were taken out and thrown. On the ground, then a guy sees a vampire's hand. And that same vampire says that with this, they are united by a blood bond. This is the Archduke of the Abyss, Vampire Lord Akamon. Great. Another fool for our protagonist to beat up. Right, the mysterious guy thanks him. The vampire says, "Tell me, how does it feel to receive the power of my race?" The mysterious guy says that there will be many people with skills similar to his, but from now on, he is going to be the strongest. This is a Chinese national level player. Zhang Ling Feng, or for those closest to him, just an extra that our protagonist will smash a while. Later, our boy finally arrived in the abyss. He gets a bit excited, right, since it's the first time he returns to the abyss. After regressing, right, while our boy was over there deep in thought, a guy welcomes him. This is a member of the World Player Association, and also the manager of the 22nd District in the deep zones of the abyss, named by Kun. Wow, look at that name, man. While they were walking through the abyss there, Bai Kun starts explaining everything that our protagonist needs to know about the abyss. Like, buddy, I don't think he really needs it. Right, but all right? He starts telling our protagonist that he needs to hire some players to be his guides or even mercenaries, right? According to him, the World Player Association sets apart some player zones that serve as base camps in secure assistance areas when exploring each district of the abyss. Right, you see that this was a pioneering idea. Right, then he starts saying that in the depths of the abyss, our protagonist is at risk of being ambushed. This and that, blah, blah, blah. And after hearing all that, our protagonist already says that he doesn't need any of that. Just him alone is enough. Boy, however, while our protagonist was over there saying he doesn't need it, simply out of nowhere, a monster appears behind his back. Before Baekhyun can say that there was a monster behind our protagonist's back, he gets completely shocked because our protagonist finished off the monster with just one attack, son. It's almost like cheating. Even I'd be shocked sometime later. Finally, our protagonist is all alone, right? Thanks to the Great Phoenix attack. At the Fire Temple, our protagonist managed to get 200 points of magic stat, necessary to activate the contract. However, from now on, our boy can open a portal to the abyss. Our boy gets a bit curious, right? Wondering why the skill changed instead of him simply controlling the monsters right now. It also has a portal creation feature, and that 11 right there means he can only use it once. Right, meaning it's a unique skill. Boy, but anyway, son, less talking and more brawling, son. Let's give it to them in this manner. He breaks the crystals in his hand, thus amplifying his magic even more, son. Then finally he activates the demonic contract, creating the portal to the depths of the abyss, and as soon as he steps through the portal, he gets a bit mind-blown, because there's a freaking giant castle. Right there, son. Could it be the vampire's castle? Over there, guys. I don't know, right? Let's find out. Our boy gets a bit curious, right? Because Hayes never heard of a place like this in the abyss. I mean, of course he used the mana amplification magic, right? To maximize his skills. But where exactly did he end up, man? However, while our protagonist was over there thinking about what he was going to do, out of nowhere, 3 succubi appear behind his back. Clearly he notices, right? And boom. He tries to blast them away, son. Well, one of the succubi says that he is holding something quite dangerous. What kind of punishment should I give you? Whoa. Could it be what I'm thinking? Man, I don't think so. Well, we have a human guest. A human, oh ho. You're completely out of your mind, right, son? It seems our protagonist got himself screwed, right, son? Because these are Shrank succubi, boy. And for you out there who don't know what a succubus is, I think that's highly impossible. But even so, let's give that brief explanation, succubus. A monster that drains men's energy through psychological attacks like illusions or brainwashing, and in other ways that are a bit lustful. I know you understand me, however. Our protagonist is a bit confused because the monster shouldn't surpass rank he keeps, wondering if they can be the target of his contract. In other words, if they are the targets of our protagonist's contract, Hayes all in, meaning he needs to finish them off. See? So, he tries to attack them in every possible way, however. They manage to dodge easily, right? The green-haired succubus says that Hayes in too much of a hurry, however. There's nothing wrong with being excited. It seems it will be difficult to take you like this. They're going to use magic to try to control our protagonist. According to the succubus, a human, especially a man, is not capable of resisting her brainwashing. Well, I think she got screwed, because our protagonist charges at her with everything, son, and boom. He hits the succubus dead on. That's already the 3rd woman he hits in this story, man. You're going to get arrested, dude. Am a thief? After giving the succubus a big punch, he uses the knight's skill. I forgot the name again. Get off your high horse. Come back down to earth. She was a bit curious, right? Like, how is this possible? How could a mere human be able to resist the brainwashing? Resist. What a joke. Being interested in monsters is something abnormal, clearly. He only resisted the succubi's attack because of predation, right, boy? So, our protagonist targets one of them to try to make a contract. Right. To form a demonic summoning contract, you need to fulfill at least one of 2 conditions. One of them is to give the monster something it desires, and the second is to force the monster to follow you through. Force. That's what our protagonist is doing, right? However, when our protagonist tries to make the contract, the system message says that this is not his contract target. Boy, our protagonist is going to be a bit confused. Right, because if this is not the target, then who is the target? Now I see that you are not an ordinary human, our protagonist. Looks, and there are tons and tons of succubi. Heading in his direction, you will be a great present for the queen. Damn, it's a world just of succubi. Son, send me to this world. And I would. Lose myself? These are the hightier succubi of rank S. Meanwhile, inside the succubi's castle, the queen's maid says that a human invaded the palace, the queen. You got a bit curious, right? Because a human here, this will be fun? She's all in, son. Meanwhile, over there inside, our boy is already running like crazy. Oh my God, because the succubi are thirsty. For him, son, however, as he was running there, a succubus appears right in front of him, trying to hit him, but that's absolutely nothing against our boy, right, guys? He manages to dodge and uses the knight's skill, and boom, knocks down the succubus. Our protagonist gets a bit thoughtful. Since the succubi are not the target of the contract, then there's only one possibility left. A monster that can control even a hightier succubus, the mother of all succubi, the one they call the queen. Boy, as soon as our protagonist gets close to the succubus's room, the throne room, right, the queen's maid, asks if he is an invader and says that he may enter, because the queen is waiting for him. As soon as our boy enters inside, she welcomes him. To her palace, she is the mother of all succubi and also their queen. This is Queen Rosaria, and it was exactly as our boy thought, right, guys? The queen is his target? Wow, our boy gets a bit curious, because it's a monster that speaks human language. However, the queen says that this is nothing to be surprised about. Since he is a human and understands the language of monsters, it's basically the same thing. Then she asks our protagonist what the purpose of his visit to her castle is. Wealth, glory, or are you simply lost, if that's not it? Did you come to satisfy your lust, however? Surprising her, our protagonist says it's none of those options. He went there to make a summoning contract. He says he came there to make a summoning contract. What? She gets a bit curious. A contract of... And after hearing this, she starts laughing. Boy, she says that she has a very entertaining guest today. However, you should put those delusions aside and learn your place. You call a children's game of playing with dolls a contract? Our protagonist says yes, that's exactly what he thinks, so stop talking and surrender. Before my power, just like that, she attacks our protagonist. From all different directions, however, our protagonist isn't helpless and keeps dodging masterfully, boy. Moving like that, he grabs his dagger and charges straight at Queen Rosaria with everything. Boy, this is my first strike, however. With just a lift of her finger, she stops the attack. Of our protagonist, guys, pathetic, this leaves him a bit curious, because he cannot use his skills. And what leaves him even more confused is, how is he back in the city, man? Wasn't he just in the abyss? Right now, did the space change? To tell the truth, no, it's not. This is an illusion, man, however. Since when did she create this illusion? Since when? From the very beginning, our protagonist is annoyed, because he needs to escape from this illusion, but suddenly, he is falling inside a car. He has a vision of when he was a child. The younger self was, saying that he saw in the broadcast that high-rank, awakened individuals earn a lot of money. He says that he will also be a high-rank awakened, and when that happens, he will buy many things for his parents. Then his mother says that he is the best, but to her, the most important thing is for him to be happy and healthy. And at first, that younger self of our protagonist, I find it touching, right? Instead of him becoming a high-rank hunter or helping his poor family, they always just wished for our protagonist's happiness. Our protagonist feels happy seeing all of this, but suddenly, the car starts catching fire and his father and mother are already dead. Meanwhile, outside the car, his uncle and aunt seem to be wondering how they could have left Kim Tae-yeon all alone. Meanwhile, on the other side, Hae's back to normal. This is a memory of when he used to get beaten up by some bullies, and it wasn't just this memory. He is having tons and tons of memories of when he was a weakling. And in one last memory, his aunt was telling him that he hasn't even recovered from his last battle. Yet what does he think he is doing? She says that money is not a problem, telling him not to worry about them. Then, our protagonist expresses his gratitude for the help that they have given him. Up until now, the fact that the boy didn't help the others was because he always brought trouble to them. True, his parents wished for his happiness, but for him to be happy, now that they are gone, he needs power. After that, a user skill was detected, and the queen's hypnosis was confirmed. Just like that. Predation tries to resist the queen's power. However, the resistance failed. My dear, you are unable to use the chains of slavery, the spirit of the sage warrior, the monarch's heart, unable to use paralysis, unable to use strength, and also unable to use stone, skin, disabled skills. 7 out of 8, meaning only predation is left. Just like that, he starts unleashing this predation on all of his memories, son. But meanwhile, our Queen Rosaria, is a bit curious, because it is surprising that he faced a monster like that and came out alive. But what is leaving her even more curious? Why is it that in this memory, he looks older than he does now? And second, these memories show different results within the exact same timelines. What secret are you hiding, boy? Let's take a look. And after she sees this memory of our protagonist, she becomes absolutely terrified, because that is the king. Boy, holy crap, man, even she knows. Him, could this crazy guy be the chosen of the king? Of the monsters guys, however. While she was searching through our protagonist's memories, predation reaches her son, destroying her illusion. Spying on other people's memories. You have a pretty disgusting hobby for a queen. He'll say it again, Queen Rosaria. Accept the summoning contract. She is impressed by our protagonist. To think he could escape her illusion? She asks the boy a question. If he really thinks that toy can kill her, but our protagonist says he doesn't know. You have to try to find out, right? Are you bluffing? However, I will accept this contract, and out of nowhere, she takes a massive bite on our protagonist's neck, sucking his blood. After biting our protagonist, the summoning contract was established. The demonic contract skill changed to Queen's contract. Right after, he secured the contract. Wow, the boy passed out. Oh boy, have sweet dreams, chosen of the king. A while later, our protagonist woke up outside the gate. He gets a bit curious, like, what am I doing here? Man, could it be Queen Rosaria who sent him? Over. There, who knows, right? And after checking his skills, Hae's sure that wasn't a dream, boy. And best of all, he gained a supreme summoning skill. Look at that beauty, which means if our protagonist summons Queen Rosaria, he can face national-level powerhouse enemies, right, son? In other words, our protagonist is going to completely crush everyone in the Asian exhibition games. But there's one thing making our protagonist curious. Why did she change her mind so out of nowhere? And also, he is a bit curious about what she said. At the end, right, chosen of the king? While our protagonist was spacing out in his thoughts there, right, that guy who has a bit of a peculiar name, I think it's better to skip to him asking what our protagonist is going to do. Now, maybe you should hire a player to be your guide. But our protagonist says, it's fine. Relax. Damn, especially since he has already finished what he had to do there. For now. So after that, he goes home, right? But what happens from here on out, you guys? We'll find out in the next video, guys. As always, smash that like button and check the link in the description. Damn it! And that was it, guys. This is the end, and see you in the next adventure.